Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 5 minutes. Please welcome Justin B. Smith, co-founder and CEO of Semaphore.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's sessions. This is an exciting set of conversations that we've curated in partnership with our wonderful partners, the Hyundai Motor Company. I'm so pleased to welcome the Executive Chairman E.S. Chung here and Vice Chairman Jay Chang as well. A quick background, if you're new to the World Economy Summit, it's hosted by Semaphore, which is a young, vibrant, very dynamic, if I may say so, news company. We're 2.5 years old. We are focused on trying to solve for the biggest problems in news, which have to do with bias and polarization and information overload, and we're doing it very actively. We have over 1 million subscribers across the world. I urge you to read our content. I do say that I did run into Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, recently, who said, I wake up every day and read Semaphore. So if it's good enough for him, I hope it'll be good enough for some of you. In our first year, we also had the idea that America, and particularly Washington, D.C., would really benefit from hosting the most significant gathering of global CEOs in this town. And it was just a small idea at first, and we're 3 months old as a company. We brought together 5 CEOs, actually, and then last year we brought together 25, and this year we're very proud that we've assembled 200 of the Fortune 500 CEOs, making this event, the World Economy Summit, the largest CEO gathering in America. So we're very proud of that. Thank you. I think the one distinction between this event and other events is absolutely based on our journalism. So what you'll find is conversations that are substantive at their heart, that represent multiple perspectives, that are on the record, and ideally nonpartisan. So look forward to many of those values. So this session right now is I think it'll be a very, very special session. It's a partner session because we're co-curating this with the Hyundai Motor Company. But what we have the CEO of Hyundai Motor Company, the president and CEO, Jose Munoz, who's going to join me for a conversation on the incredible things going on there. Jose, could you please join me? Good to see you. So I don't know how familiar this audience is with the Hyundai Motor Company story, and I'm actually not the best person to tell it. I think Jose is a better storyteller on that front, but I do know that if you are fact-based, like we are at Semaphore, and you're focused on not spinning things, but looking at actually the truth, the results of this company of the last 10 years have been unbelievable. They've grown from being, I think, I can't know, it was 8th or 9th largest automotive company in the world to the 3rd. And the innovation and the speed of innovation has been remarkable. And behind that has been the leadership team I introduced, but also at the helm is Jose Munoz. So we're really, really thrilled to talk to him about this incredible journey that you've been on. Maybe before we start, we could talk about this trajectory of the transformation of Hyundai to becoming an EV leader, an innovation leader, moving very, very rapidly, but also very, very strategically.
Well, Jason and Justin, sorry, thank you for having me. And then it's a real pleasure to be here. But I think you're asking me, I think we should ask our executive chair and our vice chair, but because they are really the ones who made the difference. But I'll say, for me, the journey has been really unbelievable. It's been now 6 years working for Hyundai. And then for those who don't know, the group is really very large with a lot of activities. And then the ones that are known the most are the automotive. And then we run 3 brands under 2 different entities. So the Hyundai brand and the Genesis brand, which is the premium brand within the group, and then the Kia one, 2 different companies. But a lot of things that most of the customers don't know is that we are in many other businesses which are related, directly or indirectly, to create the vertical integration, which I think gives the group a competitive advantage, including logistics with Glovis, including Boston Dynamics robotics, including some activities in AI, also with Boston Dynamics, including mobility with Emotional, which is based out of Boston, including Supernal, which is eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing, as to mention some, because we're also in construction of multiple things, including nuclear power plants and then engineering. So we also have affiliated companies and group companies in marketing, in ocean and others. So it's really huge. I know the numbers are not perfect, but just to give some sense, it is about $330+ billion of revenues in the group on a yearly basis. And then even though we are number 3 global OEM, I think revenues are really of the group even larger than the number 1 in sales, which is Toyota, right?
And in particular, your U.S. sales have been quite strong.
Well, U.S. has become now the most important market for us. It represents about 1/3 of the sales, and is the one driving good results. So actually, earlier today at 1 a.m., we published the Q1 results, and there were a couple of things to highlight. I think it was quite solid results, driven by North America, by hybrids, and also by the Forex. So US is by far right now the most important. Yeah.
And do you see the US being one of the most important markets going forward as well?
Well, it's a good question to make. I think, yes, the simple answer is yes. When we make decisions to invest, and then recently our executive chair, Mr. Chung, made a presentation, an announcement before President Trump at the White House, announcing $21 billion of investment over the next 4 years. Obviously, when you make such a big announcement, you are not thinking on incentives, or you are not thinking on tariffs. You're thinking more in the fundamentals. In our business, the investments are huge, in the billions of dollars, and then they last for many years, 20 plus years. In fact, next year we will celebrate our 40th anniversary in the country, and next month we celebrate the 20th anniversary of our first plant in Montgomery, Alabama. So basically, really the most important, and hopefully we'll be able to navigate the current tariff situation, and we'll maintain a strong performance, and we'll be able to get a good return of our investments here.
So recently you announced, I think in the White House, there was an announcement of a $21 billion investment into the United States. Mm-hmm. And so what is the company's outlook on your manufacturing footprint and managing your supply chain, and obviously sort of in the context of all that's going on right now?
Well, it's interesting because it all started during the first Trump administration. And at that time, we made an analysis of the potential in the market, and then the level of localization, the dependency that we had from imports from Korea. And we decided to announce so far the largest investment in Georgia. So we announced a $12.6 billion investment in Savannah, Georgia, with an assembly plant that was at the time supposed to produce EVs for 300,000 units, plus a battery plant also in Savannah, another battery plant in Bartow, also in Georgia, plus other investments of the different companies in the group, like Globis, Mobis, Transys, and then steel and material, etc. And then it was very interesting that the very same day the president announced the tariffs, we were celebrating the grand opening of the plant in Savannah. I think it was on the 25th or 26th of March. And then we were also thinking that because of the good trend the company was having in America, that probably we were going to increase the capacity of the plant to up to 500,000. I think this announcement couldn't have arrived at a better moment, because the best way to address the tariffs is to localize your investments and to produce in America.
So in some sense, the policy shifts made you think of accelerating your investments on some level?
Well, I think that's the best and fastest solution. So in fact, we utilize a word which I'm very proud of in Korea, which we call the pali-pali.
Yes, can you explain pali-pali?
Pali-pali means to be very reactive, very fast. And I think it's part of our DNA, it's part of the culture of the company. And then it is something that we try to combine with other elements.
I think in Silicon Valley they call it speed. I mean, it's some form of just incredible focus on the speed of execution. So
well,
was that pali-pali?
On steroids.
And it's on steroids, okay.
It's much more than that.
It's not strong enough for the word. It's
really
pali-pali.
And then it also combined with the spirit of the company and part of our DNA to try to take any challenge as an opportunity, right? So we were not the top players in the market. Now we're the second one selling EVs in America. And then you have to take every opportunity, every change is an opportunity for you to step up and do better, attract the consumers, and then be more competitive and improve your fundamentals. And that's the angle that we're utilizing in this new environment. This is the same as we did during COVID. In COVID, if you remember, our factories were the ones operating the most. It gave us a competitive advantage, which allowed us to increase share. And then we also made a lot of decisions, which were like selling through the dealers instead of selling to the rental companies at the time, which were more profitable at the time. But now, after the COVID crisis, we ended up having a stronger performance, and we never lost the number 3 position globally, which some people thought, okay, after COVID, you're going to lose it. Well, we didn't, and in fact, we're gaining some ground.
So it's fascinating that, and I wonder whether this is a Hyundai specific thing or an international thing, that here you have this one of the biggest crises in public policy related crises for business, and most people just send their lobbyists to Washington and start knocking on doors, and you're instead saying, what is the way that we can adapt and transform and change our company?
Well, we also have lobbyists and a lot of people doing their best. But the point is that we are not going to go and wait and see what's happening. I think one of the things we've learned in managing a crisis and in this particular situation is that we need to really pay attention to the operation. I always say that April is the most important month of our lives, right? Until May, until June, absolutely. So, and then in crisis, I remember when the tariffs were announced, everybody was asking, so what is going to happen? What is going to happen? People are uncertain. So we decided to announce what we call the Hyundai Assurance to guarantee our customers that we are going to maintain our MSRP prices. So we are not going to challenge them. And the result of that was the best March ever, the best Q1 ever. So we gave confidence to the consumer. So in times of difficulty, I think focusing on what the customers want and also managing and focusing the cash is very important. We learned that, again, during COVID. There was a time that what happened with a lot of manufacturers, the dealers were not ordering cars. When you don't order cars, you don't get paid, then you run out of cash. So what do you do instead? So you try to foment the demand, the end demand, the dealer demand, and then you continue to cash your business, and you are in business. When the others are not, then it gives you a competitive advantage. That's the same approach that we've taken now.
Fascinating. So there, as you know, there's been some skepticism about the ongoing demand for electric vehicles, but it does seem that Hyundai, amongst, compared to some others, is actually defying that, and your market is still very strong. What's your outlook for the EV market? So
it's very, very interesting question. So if you asked me the same question maybe 3 or 4 years ago, then we would have seen the future just being electric 50 to 60% minimum, if not more. Then over time, we've clearly seen that the demand is maybe not as high as everybody expected, but we still believe the future is going to be electric, except that it's going to take a little bit longer. And then why is that? But simply, it depends on how many models you launch in the market and basically the infrastructure and how much support you get by the different governments, etc. But if you look at what is happening outside, so you go, for example, to China, it's about 50% plus of the sales are EV. You go to Europe, and it's north of 20 to 25%. And here we are now stable at 8 point something. But I believe that this is going to continue to grow. For us, it's been the largest source of growth until recently, and recently it's been the hybrids. So hybrids in the quarter grew for us about 60% because a lot of consumers are thinking that they're making the best out of the two worlds. But over time, I think it's a simpler technology. The driving dynamics are better because the center of gravity is lower. The power that you get with an electric vehicle is fantastic. So the moment new technologies like the solid state, etc., come to fruition, I think we're going to see another steep growth in EVs. And we are thinking US, if you go to Europe, we are having a fantastic result thanks to Inster, which is an electric vehicle, which just was awarded the electric vehicle of the year. So in fact, last week in the New York International Auto Show. So it's been the 4th year in a row that our company has won the car of the year, the electric car of the year, the design car of the year, etc. So I think in the future we'll see much more. And then, I can't wait to launch more electric vehicles. We just launched brand new Ioniq 9 is the first large SUV that is a family vehicle that is made out of our new plant in Savannah, Georgia.
Fantastic. So I know the automotive business is a little bit like the news business. Everyone reads the news and everyone has a car, so people sort of have a personal relationship with it. I think Hyundai, just in October, the last important month, marked the 100 millionth vehicle produced by Hyundai. Let's share with all these car owners or car leasers, what will the 200 millionth car sold by Hyundai look like?
You mean by when? So I think it's going to take...
maybe not by when, but maybe what will the vehicles look like? What's this vision of the future in 100 million vehicles later?
Well, I think in the future we're going to see vehicles that they're going to be autonomous. Some call it robotaxis, but I think those vehicles are going to be also available to any consumer. So as a consumer, you will be able to buy very soon a vehicle which is autonomous. And then if you want, you drive it, and otherwise you just let the vehicle to drive you. I think we're going to see what we call today eVTOLs. So one of the things our company is doing is to develop these aircrafts which are powered by batteries, and they're going to be in operation by 2028, 2029. And then you will have a vehicle that is able to take you, for example, from Orange County to LAX, which is an impossible drive at any rush hour. You could do it in 10, 15 minutes, and I think people are going to get very used to it. So we'll see in the future more electric vehicles. I think we're going to see also hydrogen power vehicles, fuel cell EVs. That is one of the technologies that we are already operating in the United States. In fact, our new plant in Savannah is driven by the logistics of Glovis, which is our group company as well, with fuel cell EV heavy-duty trucks. Right, so it's everything environmentally friendly. We produce the hydrogen there, we charge the trucks there, we utilize them for transportation. I think that's what we're going to see, EVs, fuel cell EVs, and eVTOLs.
So we're out of time, sadly, but fascinating conversation. One last question. As a Spaniard working with a Korean company, in this moment of time, what's your advice to American CEOs facing?
Well, I will give my half other nationality. I'm also a U.S. citizen. I would say you need to be paying a lot of attention to everything that is happening. I don't think you can say you have just one strategy just for the next 20 years. You need to be agile and nimble and flexible. And I think flexibility is one of the competitive advantages that our company has, the concept of pali-pali. But I would say you need to have also a lot of scenario planning and a good baseline. I call this midi-midi. So you need to plan ahead, plan many scenarios, and be ready to move from one to the other. It's funny because if you told me what was the key success factor during COVID, so it was the fact that we were doing things that in the past we would do once a month, we would do them every day. So how many chips you receive? Okay, this is what we receive. These are the cars that we can produce, rather than these other cars, rather than having the plant idling. So flexibility, being agile, having a good baseline. And then I say to all our employees, the H from Hyundai also means to be humble, to be hungry, and to be the hardest working in the room, and then no failure.
The triple H. Okay, exactly. On that note, thank you, Jose Munoz.
Thank you.
Please welcome Scott Kirby, CEO of United Airlines, and Liz Hoffman, Business and Finance Editor at Semaphore.
Hey, Liz.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think there's probably some people in the audience from the White House. What would you like to tell them about what's going on right now? And do you have any advice?
Well, let's get air traffic control reform passed, which I think we're going to do.
That's on my list. I said we'll get to it.
But a bigger picture. What I've been saying to people is not in the White House. Wouldn't have to say this in the White House, but everyone else. After spending a lot of time in the White House, talking to a lot of the cabinet secretaries, talking to the president, we should all take a breath. Like, we're not to the end state yet. We're in the process, and we should all wait to get closer to the end state. And the other thing I would say is, having spent a lot of time there back in March, I was not surprised at a large tariff. I didn't know what it would be, but I thought it was going to be larger than the market expected. Also, when it happened, expected that it was just the first move of the chess game and that there were a lot of moves left to come. And I think part of that comes from, whether you think it's the right tactic or not. I think it's easy to argue that it's, the tactics. But I think the president has a genuine desire to make things better for middle-class Americans to create good careers. The kind of careers, by the way, that United Airlines is one of the few people that still create, one of the few places where people with a high school education can come and once they get to the top of the seniority scale, have good benefits, get to, with overtime, get to 6-digit incomes, support a family, buy a house, have a career, work at one place for 40 years and retire, with a solid future. And he's trying to create those kinds of jobs. And, I think tariffs are about that. I think that's the biggest motivation, is to kind of create those. I think it's more complicated than tariffs to actually do it, but that's the motivation. And when I felt like I've spent enough time here to understand what they're doing. And so it's not terribly surprising. And it's a lot easier to deal with the world when you're not surprised and you understand the why than you're just guessing and feeling like chaos and uncertainty. Those are not words I use like with my board or anyone. I feel like I have a more grip. Whether you agree or disagree, I have more grip on where we're headed.
Do you buy the theory of the case, though, that there have been parts of the country that have been left behind, that those jobs have been hollowed out, and that we need to somehow bring them back?
Well, the first part of the case is unquestionably true, that the middle class, has lost a lot of jobs and careers. Now, I think there's a different question of, are those the kind of jobs that you want to bring back or not, which is a fair question to have. But the middle class, it's much harder, when I was a kid growing up middle class, my mom stayed home, raised 6 kids, and, my dad had a middle class job and, but supported the family, did well, and, we lived a good life. It's much harder to do that today than it was when I was a kid. So finding whether this is the answer or not, I think there's other answers, but finding that, I think it's important to the future of the country, restoring the middle class.
There are basically 2 places in the world to buy jets. One of them is American, one of them is European, French. You have both, but when you think about sort of your fleet, you're making these really expensive decisions for a long period of time. Yeah. Where are you going to go?
So, when I talked to the president, I said, he asked me, do we buy Boeing or Airbus? We mostly buy Boeing. I said, we're actually Boeing's biggest customer. And I thought about it and said, well, actually, we're the second biggest. You're the biggest, technically, as the U.S. government. We're the second biggest. So we're a huge Boeing customer. Aviation is also, it's broader than airplanes. It's engines, and it's all of the sophisticated parts, some of the most sophisticated machined parts in the world. And aviation is centered here in the United States. It's an export powerhouse for us. We export 6 times as much as we import. And so for United Airlines, or for the aviation in general, at least for United Airlines, this is the direct impact of tariffs are likely to be relatively small because we buy so much American anyway. The indirect impacts are where, what it does to the macroeconomy are much bigger impacts.
You've been tough on Boeing in the past. They had a tough couple of years, and you were a tough customer pretty publicly. Said you were disappointed in them. Do you think there's a lot of parts of the economy that are being reframed around national security imperatives? And do you think it's important that Boeing be a American company making American planes and making them really well? Is that a national security issue?
Absolutely. And part of the reason I was tough on Boeing was not just as a customer, and I said it at the time. I think it's one of the most important companies in the country. A huge tradition, all the way back to B-29 bombers in World War II. But an engineering powerhouse, a technology powerhouse, our largest exporter. They're important to the national, the defense work that they do. They are important to the country, and I felt, and I am a very patriotic American. As went to the Air Force Academy and care. I felt like I had an obligation that transcended, being the CEO of United Airlines. Around Boeing, but also to be helpful, not to be just a critic, but to be helpful and try to be whenever we can. I do think Boeing has turned the corner. I think for what it's worth, what happened at Boeing was decades ago, the culture became financially short-term focused, and it's about hitting this quarter's numbers, which causes you to make incremental decisions that someday wind up, with somebody, not intentionally, but MCAS happening, 15 years later. When you prioritize short-term financials over the tradition, which is this great, powerful engineering, technically sophisticated powerhouse company. And I think they're returning to those roots. I think they have. I think Kelly will get them there. And I can see it. I can feel it when I talk to people at Boeing. It's not going to happen overnight. It took decades to get here, so it's going to take time to get back. But I do think they're back on the right track.
What are you seeing in consumer spending, discretionary income? What are you looking at?
Certainly for United Airlines, surprising resilience. We saw bookings decline at the end of January, but by March they had stabilized, and they've stayed stable all the way through yesterday. Actually, this week has been a little better. It's surprising. What we see is the consumer, leisure customer, both business and leisure have come down. But where the real weakness is the domestic, it's the low end. So the domestic leisure consumer is where the real weakness is. Premium demand, international loyalty programs actually have had almost no impact at all, at least that we have seen yet. But the low end consumer, we have seen it.
This is like the weekend trip to.
Well, and it's interesting, actually. I mean, I have a hypothesis, just a hypothesis. Our advanced bookings, like for leisure travel for the summer, I looked at them yesterday, for June, July, August, strong, just as good as last year. A little lower prices, but basically strong bookings. But our leisure bookings for the next 2 weeks are weaker than they were before. So my hypothesis is that, people just read the headlines and there's enough in the economy, there's enough people feel enough uncertainty that they don't actually feel anything in their current paycheck or their what they see in the real world. So they're comfortable. We always take a summer vacation, so we're going to go, to Greece this summer, and they still do that. They're comfortable doing that. But that more discretionary, like, oh, we don't have anything going on next weekend. Let's head down to the Bahamas. They're pulling back from that. I suspect that's true in the rest of the economy too. Those more, what feels more discretionary. And I think it's true for businesses too. Businesses kind of waiting to have more certainty before they make decisions. So, just more that discretionary spend, and I think that's probably true across the economy. That's waiting to see what the new normal is. Kind of went back to where I started with tariffs. Like, I think we're going to get to a new normal. We're in the sausage making process now as we go through that. People are kind of waiting to get through that and feel like they have clarity on what the future is going to look like.
You think it's going to be better than the old normal?
That depends on your perspective. What I think is my job is to manage it no matter what it is, and to understand it, to figure it out, and figure out the best path forward when we get there.
On the international travel, it's almost half your business, I think,
yeah.
Right? Should foreigners be afraid to come here?
Absolutely not. This is the greatest country in history, and we're not perfect. One of the things that makes it the greatest country in history is we constantly have all of this internal noise going on to get better, and we come out better every single time on the other side. And I think one of the things and I talk to a lot of people internationally, and one of the things that they admire is just the culture and the brand. I think our biggest export is culture. From the United States. It doesn't count in the trade statistics, but our biggest export is culture, and people aspire to be like Americans. And as Americans, the vast majority are welcoming to others when they come, and I think people should be comfortable coming. And I think the world is a better place the more we're traveling. I think Americans could go overseas as well. The more we are understanding and building those bridges, you have perspective. Perspective is what helps get through times of challenge. I think actually one of the casualties that wasn't talked about of COVID was the loss of global perspective, because when we stop traveling and seeing each other, those bridges fall apart. We need to be out with each other and talking to each other.
But you have frontline workers at airports where, and again, you airlines know this better than anyone. Certainly, Twitter headlines can make stories seem more problematic than they are, but people are being detained, and like the system is spooking people. Yeah.
Well, we still see demand strong, and I think people, by and large, should feel comfortable. I mean, if you've overstayed your visa, maybe you should feel less comfortable. But for the most part, I think people that are following the rules are fine.
Air traffic control reform.
Yeah.
You mentioned it. Big priority of yours. But regardless of whether you agree with what DOGE is doing or not. There's I think a real reckoning with the size of the government, how many people we have, where we have them, how much of that, if any, could be done by software. And air traffic control seems like an obvious place to have that conversation. Real shortages of people, some very high-profile problems. What would you like to see here?
Well, Secretary Duffy will be here tonight. I saw him earlier
him.
today, and I think there's this is one area, air traffic control reform, that there's consensus. The Secretary has a bill up. OMB is scoring it right now. Hopefully it'll be out soon. The President supports it, I think. I know that the leadership on both sides of the aisle, in both the House and Senate, are conceptually supportive. They want to see the details, but they're conceptually supportive. The United States is the greatest country on earth, and we deserve the best air traffic control and most efficient air traffic control system, and we don't have one. It's outdated, it's old, it's understaffed. We still do things in the way that we did them literally 50, 60 years ago. Technology can make that better. Technology, correct staffing, and our facilities. We've got facilities at 56 years old. The FAA spends 92% of their facilities budget on maintenance and repair because all the facilities are so old. I didn't know what our number was. I asked our team, and without me knowing why I was asking, they said, well, we're not sure. It's about 8%. So 92% of our budget is on modernizing, upgrading, building new. Literally the exact inverse of what the government has. And when you're spending all your money trying to maintain something that's a radar that's 50, 60 years old, you're so far behind the 8 ball that you don't have a chance. And so I think the air traffic control reform bill is the chance to give, and I think for the first time in my career it's actually going to happen. I'm more than optimistic. I think it's going to happen this time, that we're going to have, we're going to leapfrog to the most modern air traffic control system. That'll be great for customers. I mean, literally millions of hours for all of you. I'm sure most of you fly a lot, hopefully United. That when you fly, millions of hours of savings, more efficient, less fuel burn, just across the board, a win to do that. And I think we're going to finally get it done.
In lots of parts of the world, low cost, the budget carriers are killing it. In America, they are in a ton of trouble, and the legacy, these hulking incumbents have kind of won. What happened there?
Return of the dinosaur.
So giving you a chance to brag. What happened?
Well, look, we built a better model for customers, in short. The low-cost carrier model is about, we're going to offer you a low price, and we're going to, pardon my language, but screw you everywhere else. And customers hate it. And if you build an airline where you can be competitive on price, we have a basic economy product. We got bigger airplanes too, because it's less cost per seat. And we can be competitive on price, but give you a much better product and a much better experience. And they just run out of demand. We also competed on the high ground. So we did, so many airlines around the world have tried, this is almost everywhere, try to compete with low-cost carriers by trying to be a better low-cost carrier than the low-cost carrier. They create an airline within an airline, they go try to fly head-to-head and compete with them. And some U.S. airlines did that. It was disastrous. Early in my career, I saw them do it. It was disastrous. We built a better model. We're going to compete on our high ground. We're not going to go try to fly from Brownsville to Las Vegas and compete with Allegiant. But in Denver or Chicago or Newark or Los Angeles, in our hubs, we're going to create a better product for customers at a competitive price, and we win when we compete on our high ground. And then I think the final thing I would say is, at least here in the United States, the airport authorities killed the low-cost carrier business model. It now costs, the New York airports, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, 3 biggest markets in the country, close to $50 per passenger goes to the airport fees, the expenses for the airport. Well, low-cost carrier business model, average fare $70. You're spending 70% of your ticket price just paying the airport, and you haven't bought your fuel, you haven't paid your employees, you haven't paid for your airplanes. The business model just doesn't work. And so the airport authorities, and by the way, since COVID, they've grown 9% CAGR in the last 6 years. Those costs killed the low-cost carrier business model.
Time we have left, and I'll go back to something you said earlier about the sort of America as a brand, and we had Ken Griffin here yesterday, and said that we are eroding that brand. And I'm curious, airlines are in some ways an ambassador, right? You fly and people see you and know that you are an American brand and you're all over the world. Do you feel that at all? Well,
and I'm proud of that. We say we're about connecting people and uniting the world. I feel that way, that we are a brand, an ambassador for the United States. Our people feel that way. That's one of the things that makes us love coming to work every day. And look, there's always ups and downs. There's always things that people like or dislike. But I have incredible confidence in the country. We're fortunate, all of us that were born here in this country. The Founding Fathers gave us the best system. We're going to have our 250th anniversary next year. I'm excited about that. We're fortunate to have been born here. And we go, we've been through periods where people are unhappy before, and there's disagreement. But we always come out on the other side. This is a great country. It's great people. It's a great culture. And I believe, I'm like Warren Buffett. I sure wouldn't bet against the United States in the long term.
All right, well, listen, thank you for the time. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Hadi Badri, CEO of Dubai Economic Development Corporation, and Mohammed Serge, Gulf Editor at Semaphore.
There we go. Well, I'm not going to start with the brand question, but something similar to that. So when you were in college, let's say 20 years ago, coming to Boston, and you would tell people you're from Dubai, what was their reaction then to today?
Mohammed, you're revealing how young I am. Thank you. Yeah, Dubai's come a long way in the past 20, 25 years. 25 years ago, we didn't have the world's tallest tower. We didn't have a top 10 global financial center. We didn't have amongst the world's largest retail malls with the Dubai Mall. We actually didn't even have long-haul flights from Dubai to anywhere in the world beyond 7 hours. And you look where we are today, it's an astonishing development. 25 years ago, it was the year 2000. In the year 2000, we had 3 million visitors to Dubai. It was a record. Today, we have 3 million visitors every 2 months to Dubai. Tourists represent 5 times our resident population, and our resident population last year grew 6%. Business licenses in Dubai last year grew 30%. So we continue on a very rapid acceleration, and it's amazing to see what the city has achieved.
Yeah. So people know it now, right? When you tell them Dubai, they kind of understand what the brand is, what the appeal is.
They do. They know Dubai for a number of reasons. Of course, that go beyond the Dubai chocolate, which is of course the latest social media viral campaign.
We're going to get to that.
We'll get to that. But I think the level of awareness for Dubai today is really second to none. On the back of COVID and how we managed COVID on an absolute and relative basis, it really created a lot of credibility. People that were in the city were really experiencing what Dubai was like, not only to visit, because we were open. Actually, we only closed down for about 6 weeks. And so we welcomed visitors, and they saw what Dubai was like to visit, to do business, and to do business around the world. We had a lot of people who were in Dubai who were running global companies and then realizing very quickly that actually it was very advantageous from a time zone perspective to be able to do that. And the way our government handled keeping them happy, keeping them safe, all the testing, all the vaccines, and really trying to stay open and normal during COVID, created a significant level of advocacy.
Got it.
And people started to spread the news about Dubai. We always used to say Dubai was a bit undiscovered. We were always investing in infrastructure ahead of the curve. And it really created this momentum that we have over the past few years.
And this is something you saw, before you were working with Airline, maybe looking at international, but you still saw the portfolio of the building of, availability of units and all that stuff in terms of real estate. This real estate boom has been going on now for like maybe three or 4 years. I'm not sure about how many quarters, but definitely over 3 years. Dubai has had booms and busts. Does this look different in terms from the data about how people are buying properties, and is it more sustainable than the last over-leveraged boom?
We definitely think that it's very sustainable. The growth last year in real estate was about 30%. Over the past 7 years, it's been as high as 70% year on year. And what really makes it sustainable is the excitement that Dubai has created in terms of job creation. Today, Dubai is the #1 city in the world in terms of where people are looking to move, to live, to work. It's the #1 searched online on Google. It's the #1 searched online in terms of LinkedIn. And we all use those formats all the time, so we have to believe that data. And so, on the back of that, we really see enough data points in terms of talent that want to move to Dubai that is giving us the confidence. At the same time, when talent moves, businesses are really growing. Smart money is following that talent. The UAE was the #1 net beneficiary of high net worth individuals for the past few years consecutively. And Dubai is really taking the lion's share of that momentum. And when they come, they're coming for quality of life, safety, security, tolerance, and optimism, especially on the back of COVID and all the challenges that we have globally from a geopolitical perspective and otherwise. People are looking for hope, they're looking for optimism, and Dubai is really attracting talent through that lens.
It's, Dubai has been, that's true, it's been successful at, kind of taking in people who are running away from conflict, or when there was a Ukraine-Russia war, people left from Russia, left from Ukraine as well, started businesses. Are we going to see another kind of like a trade arbitrage, people going to places like Dubai that have logistics and open borders to some extent and connectivity to the world? Is that the next positioning of Dubai?
Connectivity is definitely a superpower for Dubai. We are connected by sea and by air to 400 cities directly. And so that's an obvious kind of opportunity for us. I think the other arbitrage or opportunity is from a talent perspective. Businesses come to Dubai to be able to tap into 200 nationalities of talent. And we hear time and time again from businesses who say, we want to come and we want to set up in Dubai because we see the opportunities that Dubai offers without putting any quotas or restrictions on who can come and actually work. And when you have a mix of nationalities working together, living together in harmony, exchanging ideas, just by definition, when you have that diversity, the level of ideation goes up, level of knowledge sharing goes up. And so, we think as we pursue this view of how do we make Dubai the most innovative city in the world, talent is really going to underpin that.
I want to ask you a bit about where the future is going. I know this is part of your main part of your job, really. So, the way I think, and a lot of people think about Dubai, outside of the flash, is there's the port, there's the airport. To some extent, there's real estate. If you think about it just in financial terms, that kind of creates or generates most of the GDP, and then you have financial services on top. But how do you see that makeup changing, and specifically into this plan of D33? Are we still going to? It's still going to say the buckets are going to remain the same, and it's just going to go. The pie is going to get bigger, or are there new industries that you are trying to push?
So D33 is our 10-year plan. The D stands for Dubai, 33 stands for 2033. So we're 2 years into this, and really the plan is underpinned by this focus on diversification, and the reason for that focus is. A couple of years ago, we did a study and we saw that 3 sectors are contributing 55% of Dubai's GDP. And we benchmarked and looked at other global cities and we saw that they were much more diversified. Not only were they more diversified, but as they diversified over time, they became richer economies. They became more robust economies. And so our D33 plan actually looks to get 8 sectors up to a minimum threshold of 5% GDP contribution. And in doing so, we think that we can actually move up the curve in terms of becoming a richer, more productive, more diverse, more sustainable economy. Logistics will continue to be a core focus for us. We have great assets and capabilities with the likes of DP World, Emirates Sky Cargo, really powering global trade through Dubai. DP World carries 10% of global trade. It's a substantial number, and it's a number that we want to continue to push forward.
Even if I found a surprising data that points from WTO the other day, Dubai is the 11th biggest importer of goods in the world, or the UAE. The UAE is the 11th biggest importer of the world, and I think the 13th biggest exporter.
Yeah, and you look at foreign trade represents 5 times our GDP.
Yeah.
If you compare that to Singapore foreign trade is 2 times GDP. And so there's obviously a lot of trade coming in and out of Dubai all the time. So logistics is going to continue to be a key area for us. But that's where we really want to up our game in terms of productivity, leveraging AI, new technologies, and so on. Manufacturing is also an interesting area, we think, because anyone who sets up manufacturing in Dubai will do so using Dubai as a platform to be able to export to the rest of the world. The UAE has free trade agreements with 40 countries. We're looking to sign an additional 20 countries as UAE. That's an attractive pipeline that we think. And as a city, we want to continue to be open when other cities are talking about whether they want to close or what they want to do from a trade perspective. Financial services, another key area for us, and an area where we recognize if we really want to be a top 3 global city, which is our stated claim, then the financial services sector has to really be firing on all cylinders, needs to be productive, because all cities worth their salt that are in that top echelon have very good financial services sectors.
So what would the metric be to that? Is it AUM or a number of people working in finance jobs? How would you do it?
It's a number of things. It's making sure that Dubai is the bank of the region, similar to how Switzerland is the Bank of Europe. SME lending is a key area for us. We want to really augment the contribution that SMEs do in our part of the world, in Dubai. It is wealth management from the perspective of AUMs, but also are wealth managers offering the right service and product suite to those high net worth individuals that are coming and living in Dubai that is comparable to what they would get in Geneva or New York or otherwise.
Yeah. No, so the question here, and I think a lot of people will have it, it sounds in some ways similar to the ambitions or the plans of a Saudi Vision 2030, or even what Abu Dhabi wants to do, or Qatar. And obviously Dubai has had a first mover advantage in many of these things. But how does this competition affect your ability to, in a sense, attract the same talent, the same money, and somewhat the same infrastructure and vision for these places?
I think Dubai's been at it for years. It's been 50 years of significant investment in infrastructure. We built the hardware. The software is really getting upgraded on a almost daily basis, right? If you take FDI, for example, Dubai is the #1 city in the world in terms of foreign direct investment. It has been for the past 4 consecutive years. FDI last year went up 30% when FDI globally was actually not looking in a good shape, was a bit shaky. And so, the fact that we've been at it and we've been successful, and we as a government have a track record, and we as a government have the highest trust ratings globally amongst investors, gives investors confidence. So the value system of Dubai continues to be the same. It's passed on generation to generation. We are very pro-business, very pro-investment. We are a very high-touch government as it relates to engaging with business and investors to give them the confidence to invest. And I think also we've reached a certain threshold in terms of ecosystem development that really gives businesses and investors confidence that they should be investing in Dubai.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we've got a couple minutes left, so I do want to talk about the chocolate. I think people are obsessed with this chocolate. If you don't know, it's basically a shell of milk chocolate, and then inside there's a pistachio paste with a bunch of sugar, and then the knafe, like a phyllo crunchy part inside. It's delicious, it's fine, it's great. I wonder if from inside of Dubai, like the government and the offices where you work in, did this take you by storm? Were you expecting to be branded globally as a Dubai chocolate, as a Swiss chocolate of the Arabs?
I mean, firstly, congratulations to the Dubai-based founders to come up with this viral product. Very entrepreneurial lady. She's done an amazing job, and we as a government are looking to see how we can further support her. I think the brand Dubai really has an amazing halo effect. Right? I met recently a lady who designs dresses, and she sells them in Thailand, and she manufactures in Dubai. And she says, because I am in Dubai, and I put Dubai on my business card, it creates that allure. Fashion capital. Dubai is known for its luxury, known for its quality, and that allows her to market globally. That allows her to charge a certain price. Where if she was doing it anywhere else in the world, she wouldn't be able to be able to do that. So I think Brand Dubai, credit to everyone. And when I say everyone, yes, as a government, we are the custodian of the brand, but credit to everyone because it's the individuals and the businesses that operate out of Dubai. It is the local champions like Emirates and DP World and others that are really carrying the flag so proudly of the UAE. And I'll also mention one final thing, which I think is really important. The philosophy of our leadership is not always about GDP growth. It's not always about FDI. Yes, those things are important. But the philosophy of our leadership is very simple. Are the people in Dubai, the residents, happy? And what are we doing as a government to make them happy? And are businesses happy? Are they making money? Are we engaging with them? Are we consulting with them so they can give inputs on what we can do better all the time? And I think that is the brand of Dubai.
All right, sounds good. Effective government and a good chocolate. Thank you so much, Hadi, and really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Dave Bozeman, President and CEO of C.H. Robinson Worldwide, Niraj Shah, CEO of Wayfair, and Matt Murray, Executive Editor at The Washington Post.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here with you all. Great to be here with you too. Thank you very much for being here today. We want to talk about a few things and some of the big things that you and your customers are dealing with. And let's start with the economy, which is everybody's been talking about obviously quite a bit the last few days. We have a great kind of sample of the economy between the two of you. We've got sort of the supply side, transport side, shipping side. We've got the consumer demand side. Can I ask, starting with you, Dave, and then Niraj, from your perspective, from your customers, what's the temperature in the economy right now? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you anticipating?
Well, glad to be here, Matt. As you've been hearing, I think throughout the day, throughout this wonderful conference, it's uncertainty. We, with C.H. Robinson, we deal with 83,000 customers worldwide, and there's a pretty good temperature, and that temperature is uncertainty. And so each one has different solutions that they're looking for to do this. So we have some customers that are changing, say, their origin destination of their goods because of uncertainty. We had a real life situation, a customer who exported pet food from the US to China. Their duties changed midway through the journey. It would have been a $6 million duty. Had it landed in China, we had to help them move it to Japan. So customers are trying to figure out their supply chains, but it's not new. Supply chains have been changing since the financial crisis, and they've been getting more resilient. So a number of customers have really changed and propped up their supply chains. However, when you have the two largest economies going head to head a bit, no one can really anticipate that. So there is some uncertainty and change, and we're right in the middle of that.
So uncertainty, but Niraj, not yet, as I understand it, like actual stepping back right in front of our eyes right now by consumers, by buyers, right? It's warning signs theoretically, but things are holding up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been seeing, and we watch the credit card data from a variety of sources. I think Bank of America has come out and said this, but we see 5, 6 of these panels, and then obviously we see our own demand. The consumer spending is held pretty steady, so that there's been no real drop off. There's a few categories that had a little bit of pull forward, which I think was like a very short-lived. But basically, things are steady. The question really, I think folks are asking is what will happen in X period of time, 2 months' time, 3 months' time, 4 months' time, if prices go up and availability gets more limited what would happen to demand then? And I think that's where some of these consumer sentiments surveys, which show declining sentiment, particularly forward-looking, I think play a role. But to date, that has not yet come to pass.
I mean, Dave, I would think you would see early signs of the kind of thing Niraj is talking about, because I mean, you hear reports about fewer ships being planned coming up in a couple of months, people pulling back on volume. Are you starting to see that as you look ahead at bookings?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some early pull aheads, and to Niraj's point, there are reduced sailings coming out of China. If we had to look at it, it's an average of, if I like to look at average inventory, call it 1 to 3 months of inventory that's out there. So you can start to do the math that customers are banking on burning off that inventory. So in a sense, the clock is kind of running here. At some point when that inventory starts to burn off and you get into new priced inventory, that starts to drive a different sentiment.
And so you are seeing at least a little bit, looking down a couple months or a few weeks, of that at least suggests there's a little of that.
Yeah, I like to look around corners here, and the inventories are something we're watching along with reduced sailings. So we want to see that really get back up and going and get in the global supply chain. You don't want the global supply chain to kind of grind down here.
So one thing we're seeing on that, Matt, so we work with over 20,000 suppliers who are selling goods on our platform, over 20 million items, sourcing from over 100 different countries. And what we're seeing is that they're not all doing the same thing as each other. So some folks are continuing to flow bestsellers. Some folks are really holding on everything. Some folks are saying that they're going to absorb the cost increase for a period of time. And so I think it can also create winners and losers in terms of the strategy a given company takes and how the reality plays out.
Niraj, though, for Wayfair, that's a complex equation. You've got 20,000 suppliers, and you're selling to consumers who themselves are in flux, even if signs aren't there. And so how are you calculating, and how far ahead are you able to look, and what do you foresee, say, coming in the summer economically? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so what we try to do for our supplier partners is give them good advice around what we're seeing broadly to help inform them around what would help them stay competitive. And then obviously they need to make decisions on how much inventory they want to flow, what risk they want to take, where they want to pull back. We have the benefit of just having a tremendous selection. So, over 20,000 bar stools, over hundreds of thousands of accent pillows on our site. So when you don't have certain selection, you actually don't necessarily immediately have the customer have the pain of not having good selection, right? So I think we have that as an insulation layer. But what we're seeing for suppliers is that they know that things are likely to evolve. They're likely to evolve to a situation that allows their business to continue to function. So they don't want to kind of shoot themselves in the foot by taking themselves out of the game entirely. But they need to manage the economics in a way that is, manageable. And so this is the kind of, the threading the needle that they're trying to work on.
Yeah,
I was going to say, we see that in working with customers to solve their problems. Some we move into free trade zones. Some they're pooling product in certain countries, and we change modes, moving to, say, Vietnam for starts. So different solutions for different customers, as Niraj is saying. And we have to work all of those different solutions, and the economics are a big part of it.
It sounds like a whack-a-mole more than it's been, of trying to think about where's going next in different individual situations and how to plan.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. A number of people have been working on this. Niraj's company, others have really thought through their supply chains and where they want to be. And then sometimes physics will kick in, like we're dealing with, and we'll just have to deal with that coming out of China.
Having gone from the sort of uncertainty and challenge in the immediate short term, I want to take a slightly longer term view, separate from the politics, whatever's happening with trade, whatever ends up with tariffs. We're clearly in a different space globally than we've been. We're really in more of some kind of an age of bilateralism, some kind of an age of trade protectionism, even as that changes. The sort of broadly globalizing, broadly widening economy that we all started in is really changing in front of our eyes. We don't know exactly how that'll look or how it'll continue to change, but can I ask, starting with you, Dave, and then Niraj, how's that environment and the sort of changing expectations of the world making you think of where your company is going?
Well, it's a good question. We actually start to have a different conversation in driving our company, engaging with our board, and the thinking is really around a 3-horizon strategy. And I like to look at Horizon 1 being 0 to 3 years on how you look at things immediately, Horizon 2, 3 to 7 years, and Horizon 3, 7 and beyond. And really start looking out at what are those emerging trends, discount back and make the decisions today for those things that are out in the future. And that's been really helpful on the clarity of where we're going. Driving discipline and a model for that and solving for customers' problems and just staying to the things that you can control with your customers, but having not a everyday type of an approach, but more of a strategic approach. Because let's face it, disruption is here to stay. We're going to have disruption. We always have had disruption. And I think in supply chains, the best thing you can do is start to think out in those different horizons, work with your customers, give them those options, and drive those solutions.
Niraj, Dave says disruption is here to stay, but part of the disruption in the world we're in now is even larger things that we took as fundamentals or givens or backdrops in the age of globalization are changing. So what does it mean over time for Wayfair, and how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think we have our view is slightly different in the sense that, if you think about our industry, the goods were made domestically for a long time. Then when you get to the 1980s, 1990s, you see them move abroad, mainly to China. Then in our industry, starting around 2000, there was a lot of anti-dumping duties on a lot of wooden furniture, for example, and some of the largest producers in China started to move to other parts of the world producing these goods. Then in 2019, you have the round of tariffs, the 25% tariffs coming out of China. Now we're 6 years later with higher tariffs, maybe a 10% global tariff, and then higher tariffs on China or wherever it evolves to. So I would actually say that it's a constantly evolving thing, and that it actually has not been a standard for any long period of time, because if we just roll back the last 50 years, we actually have a lot of movement back and forth. And so I think it just feels very sudden when the latest turn just shows up right in front of you. And so I think it's all navigable. The question is just how do you do it as adroitly as possible?
Is there a description or way you think about what globalization or whatever term we use is in the world today? Like when you talk about adjustment, because we think of globalization as sort of broad, ever lowering trade barriers, more access. We're clearly in a different evolving thing, but I don't know if there's a simple paradigm or way to think about it.
Well, I think there's like a constant balance that different countries want to have with each other around how they build their own economy, but they also build their own independence and safety. And there's a kind of a yin and yang to it. And so, just like everything, you'd love to always be like straight on that line, but you kind of swing this way, you swing that way, you swing this way, but you're basically, most things tend to, the pendulum tends to come back. And I think that is maybe some of what's happening when you think about the various dynamics in play. And so then the question actually is in the narrow moment, how do you navigate it? I think as you zoom out, these, because the economics still play a role, but the economics manifest in many different ways.
Is China a big factor in where you source now, and is it likely to stay that specifically?
Yeah, I would say our suppliers, just following the whole industry, our suppliers had built a very, very heavy focus on China over the last, few decades. And then what's happened, particularly over the last, 6 years since 2019, you've seen them start to diversify back out. And then there's been a base of U.S. producers that have stayed U.S. And then there's also a lot of nearshore production. And then there's some countries that have been emerging, folks like Brazil, India, Turkey, that are actually rising as sources. So there's a kind of it really is not a one size fits all.
Let's talk about one other area of disruption that we're all feeling every minute, which is AI. So Dave, for a business like yours, a large, complex, global business with lots of different facets, how is AI helping you? How is it challenging you? How is it changing the business for you?
Well, first of all, we're all in on AI. I've said that it's a game changer, and it has been in our business. And I say it's a game changer because it's really driven over 2 years of 30% productivity within our business. Now we have the largest data set in the industry, and
in terms of time saved, in terms of jobs eliminated,
in terms of time saved and productivity. If you look at order to cash, the entire life cycle, Along that journey are a number of handoffs, manual tasks, things like that. Yesterday, let's just take a quote, for example. We get hundreds of thousands of quotes coming in to, can you move this product from one origin to one destination? And yesterday, a human would consume that, talk back, and give that quote, if they can get to all of those. Today, as we use our large language models, we hit every quote that comes in. It does it back in a conversational manner with the quote with much more detailed specifics, and it's all done in 90 seconds in a conversational manner. And that has really changed. Number one, our people now can do the solutioning and the things, the interactions with customers that we want them to do. All of the menial manual tasks are being eliminated. And we've seen just a world of change. 90 seconds, and yesterday we were doing that in, say, almost 30 minutes. So it's a huge change, and we're early innings.
And in light of what we're talking about here, otherwise, it means you can move much quicker and calculate much quicker for changing conditions, I would think.
You can predict things as well.
There's a lot with AI, but it means probably in time a smaller workforce for your company, you think, total? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing about when it comes to customer facing and selling, we're investing in those roles. When it comes to the roles that have to do tracking and tracing and things like that, we won't have as many individuals on that. So it's a shifting of the work and a shifting of the way that the company actually operates. And we've seen it at our scale. It becomes pretty game changing.
How about for you, Niraj?
Yeah, so we have a technology organization of about 2,500 people, so a reasonably large size organization.
Have you built that up in recent years? Has it been there for a long time?
We built it up. So a number of years ago, we really scaled it up, and so we've had that. We've been in the thousands of people for a few years, for a number of years now, and we've always been sort of a kind of technology first kind of orientation on how we do things. We believe that it can really allow us to really significantly enhance how we operate in the customer experience. So to give you an example, I mentioned we have over 20 million items. Well, for every item, we try to have about 200 attributes of data, not just dimensions and color, but the style and, does that bed have hidden storage? Does, what are the inches of clearance to the bottom of the bed? All these types of detailed things. Well, on a given item, we're missing some number of those attributes always. Well, one of the things we found is we can now fill those in accurately using Gen AI. So now all of a sudden the customer's search and navigation experience can be heightened. Or a lot of what we've been a kind of an innovator around digital imagery. And so now you can basically help someone really navigate from the standpoint of you can take photos of their room and you can start generating imagery that's for them using everything we've discerned about their style, the items they're looking at, and their preferences. So you can make the experience much more engaging.
And some of those are probably examples where when people get polled about AI and express discomfort, they don't even know that that's AI exactly. It's computing that's just making the experience better for them.
Yeah, so what is possible to do today is like significantly better than what was possible before. And they just sort of, what happens is people's expectation of the quality of the experience they're going to have, the answers they can get, just keeps going up. The way it's being done is with modern technology.
Yeah. I think let me ask a very quick one. Very quickly, we got just a few seconds left. As executives, very quickly, how much time do you spend on AI and how do you learn about it since it's happening in front of our eyes? Can you quickly
I spend a significant amount and I go to Gemba, meaning I go to work. I actually go and see our engineers. We build our own large language models, try to understand the code, try to understand the applications of it, and to stay relevant because you're going to be making high judgment decisions on it.
How about you, Niraj?
Yeah, so we've rolled out access to the LLMs to our entire company, and then we basically we started with sort of about a dozen use cases about a year ago. We started driving it through the organization. Now it's sort of becoming part of what everyone does. We rolled out company-wide training where everyone actually took some training modules to get them comfortable and understanding. Using the LLMs, like you just need to teach someone how to write prompts and how to act like you're actually having a conversation with a person, go back and forth. It's like simple things that are non-intuitive that get you to much higher quality output. And then we sort of taught different folks like very specific use cases that then got them thinking about other things they could do. So it doesn't happen automatically, but if you really drive it through, it can actually be game changing.
Absolutely. Dave Bozeman, Niraj Shah, thank you both very much for a great conversation. Thanks for
Thank you, Matt.
Please welcome Amos Hochstein, Managing Partner at TWG Global, Hossein El Khoury, CEO of Osemi, and Reed Abergati, Technology Editor at Semaphore.
Thank you both for being here. Hossein, I wanted to ask you, we were talking last week about what was happening at your company around, the supply chain and semiconductors. You make these chips in a New York fab that are used in everything from electric cars, battery management, to data centers. You should be in the clear in terms of tariffs, but it's not that simple. Can you explain to me, what was going on last week and how you handled it?
Well, I think from one thing that COVID did teach us, very important thing, is supply resilience. So when you talk about supply resilience, a lot of people mix up resilience and assurance. Assurance is making sure you can make stuff no matter what, if you lose power or anything, but it's local. What we've set out to do is supply resilience across the board. And what we've done is, although we have a fab geographically distributed footprint, we have 18 factories worldwide. A lot of them are in the US, but also overseas. So what you do is you start cross-pollinating technologies within fabs. Because look, whether it's COVID, it's tariff, I look at it as it's a disruption. It's, to me, the new normal. So you can't say, I can't wait for it to go back to quote-unquote normal. We're not. What the disruption is, I don't know. But there are strategies you can put in place of cross-pollination. You start becoming agnostic to what it is, whether it's a flood or a fire or COVID or tariff. You just have to be able to think on your feet and move technology quickly in a world that is 2 to 3 years to build a fab. So how do you do that while you have a very broad network? And that's what we've been able to do. So we've navigated very well. We've supported the customers who are making electric vehicles or building AI data centers.
Did you figure it out though? See, these chips don't just go from New York to an electric car in somewhere in the U.S. They're going all around the world, right? And what would those people have been doing if they weren't dealing with, how do we figure out this tariff situation?
Oh, we're busy enough trying to figure out the next breakthrough and we'll talk about it, because the technology, what I want people to spend more time on is not figuring out how to ship things from A to B. This should happen automatically with AI, of how to break bottlenecks and ship things through the most efficient way from time, but also from power and from cost. So what we spend most of our time, even in this environment of uncertainty, what we spend most of our time is, what is the next breakthrough going to be in order to get the edge, as we know for a fact, no matter what industry you're in, power is a primary constant that is only going up from here.
And Amos, you worked on this in the previous administration. I think you're telling me this story about these, talking about how much power was needed for these AI data centers, and you sort of realizing, well, there is not nearly enough. The current administration has talked about using coal to power data centers now. Is that a good idea? And how should we be doing this?
Man, I was sitting here thinking, thank God I'm not going to get the tariff question. Instead, I got the coal question. Jesus. So speaking of tariffs, it's
the softball tariff question.
When we started listening to, as AI, right, 10 years ago, we were talking about cloud. Everything was about cloud. Then we talked about compute. Now we're talking about AI. And Rita's, you were referencing before, a couple of years ago, when we were talking to some of the hyperscalers at the White House, more about how do we think about the national security implications, can you build these outside the country, where, et cetera. The conversation was never about power. It was about, we're going to build a gigawatt cluster, we're going to build another one. So I was sitting in the room just saying, these are like 5 to 6 people talking about building a gigawatt, where the cluster, like, where the hell's the power coming from? Like, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine, we're going to do, it's got renewables are coming up. I said, don't you need it for 24/7? And different than the regular grid demand, which fluctuates, A data center doesn't fluctuate. It needs the power at a constant basis. So where I think we are now, and I think this administration is trying to grapple with the same thing we were, and that is what's the role of government in it versus what's the role of the private sector? And the government is looking at it from a perspective, I think should look at it from the perspective of reducing the cost of capital for it, creating a certainty in the regulatory environment, and allowing for permitting to get done a lot faster at the federal level and encouraged to the degree possible at the state and local level to make it faster, because you got to build more power generation. The second myth that we have in the press a lot is, what's the grid like? We don't have a grid. We're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have a grid. We have multiple grids. So you can have excess power in a certain region, but it's completely irrelevant because we're not building data centers there. So what we have to create, what I think now, is forget about coal or renewables. We have to look at some kind of a Venn diagram of what are the places in the country that I have the land, a positive regulatory environment, water, an abundance of water, and the ability to get electricity. And I think to where we are today, most hyperscalers talked originally about we're going to do this as clean energy. I think now we have to think about how do we do an energy transition within the AI system, which is natural gas at the wellhead sort of closer by, with a horizon of having as much green power coming online. And I think what onsemi is doing and other companies of allowing to have the kind of battery storage that will be there. We're not there yet. And I think that's an opportunity. It's a challenge. And I think it's not about choosing which power source. It's about focusing on how do we get an environment that it is investable. And at TWG, we're trying to look at what are the opportunities here that make this as a commercial opportunity, because the hyperscaler doesn't want to generate power. They want to offtake power. And I think there's a gap here of how do we create an investable product that is creating additional generation of power in the right places that are closer by to the data centers, so that this is a more efficient process. I think we're almost there, but I think that's where the traction is, and that's where the sand in the gear still is. So I don't worry too much about bringing on coal or not. I'll let them worry about that.
They doing a good job?
On what?
What you just described.
Look, I think it's early. I think there are clearly things that I would do differently. But I think Secretary Burgum yesterday, talked about trying to invest in the supply chain. I think that's a smart thing to do. I think there's a number of things that they've continued from the Biden administration on looking, how do we look at the permitting? I think that's the right approach. I think I give them, the high mark of understanding that that's the right place to be. I think it's early. It's an early stage, but we have to have a strategy here that allows for the private sector and finance to invest in something that is traditionally not an attractive investment. Utilities were usually what would generate electricity. That's not a high margin. So we have to break that model, and I think that we're disaggregating it in a way that will be investable, but the government's going to have to play the role on this.
Yeah, Hussein, another area that's sort of part of this whole, you mentioned the competition with China, is talent. What's happening? Tech companies are telling their employees not to leave the country who are on visas or green cards even. People are kind of afraid to come here. Is that helping in this sort of big vision of, that we've just described?
We're
just another softball question.
I know, it doesn't get easier from here. We're laughing because we were just talking about it outside of this conversation. We were just comparing notes in general.
Yeah.
And I was telling him, I moved here to go to college years ago, and I'm still here. The point I'll make is not whether you're afraid or not. Talent wants to contribute. Talent measures your satisfaction on what do you contribute to the job, what do you contribute to the country, what do you contribute to whoever your environment is. High caliber talent wants to contribute. Therefore, they will go wherever they can contribute. And the problem is not talent is worried in politics and so on. It's immigration. We need a solid immigration policy in the US in order to attract talent to come, but more importantly, to stay. What you don't want is getting talent to the country, educating in our educational system, and then everybody leaves because there's no path forward. That's a topic that we can spend weeks on, and I think we've spent administrations on. But I think at the core of the talent and where the R&D is, especially as we bring, whether it's manufacturing or we bring R&D to the United States, you need to have the talent pool that comes in with it, not at the expense of the local talent pool, but as a complement of the local talent pool. I think you have to be able to solve both while you focus on the educational system to generate the next generation of talent here locally.
Yeah. Do you think, Amos, when you talk about these, new types of technologies for batteries and things like that, I mean, basic research is a big part of that. How do you see that sort of, there's a lot of questions around, are we funding enough basic research? What do you think? Are we
I think the challenge that I think we had a model that worked in the United States. And at the end of the day, China's better than us at taking technologies and creating or copying them or stealing them, and then creating a ability to scale manufacturing so you can reduce the cost at a rate that we can't do, and to sometimes then create 2.0, 3.0. They're not as good at taking from nothing to something, of innovating the technology out of nothing. And if you look at almost every technological innovation of the last, in the modern era, it's like 80% has come from the United States. And I think it connects to what Hassan said before about talent came here and stayed, and you look at some of the big innovations happening in the United States, they happened by people who came to America because this was the place to innovate. And the government participated in that, whether it's in the medical field and funding through NIH and universities and science, funding companies that were not able to, did not have the balance sheet to get bank loans, such as Tesla or others, from the US government. And you funded R&D and new startups. And that's the secret sauce of the United States, is that we're the hub for innovation. That is what will separate us. You talk about who's winning the future. I'm a big believer in America. I believe that we will win the future. But we can't lose sight of part of winning the future is investing in our innovation, investing in R&D. We have innovation, research, and we have the best capital market in the world. And that combination, I think, is the winning combination. We should continue to have that.
I think to add to that, the government supports the industry. But if you think about a lot of the R&D investments that are done are facilitated in a R&D friendly environment driven by policies. But more importantly, it's the dollars, the scale of dollars comes from the private sector and private investments. That's what you have to keep in order to, like, for example, for us, we fund research in a lot of the top universities here in North America. That in combination with policies that support that and directs it is going to attract that talent, the high caliber talent, and then the industry is what keeps the talent here in an R&D provided environment that is driven by policy but supported by the private sector. That's the balance we need.
I think we have time for one more, and I wanted to put your industry association hat on for a second. What do you think of the chip exports, and where's that headed, and how does that fit into this?
I thought it was going to get easier from the tariff question. Look, personally, as an industry hat on, I support the CHIPS Act. I was part of the work that our industry has done in order to get it, because we do need such a program. How it goes, it could be translated into permitting. It could be translated into bringing the work here. But there has to be a balancing act because it's the level playing field. I don't look at the CHIPS Act as a subsidizing something, or, there's a lot of headlines that are a little bit more negative than what the CHIPS Act is. But from an industry perspective, you want to talk about level playing field. The ability of China and a lot of other countries to scale very quickly is through these programs that they provide to the industry in order to get the ramp going, the scale going, while you're going after the demand. In our industry, you can't just build a small fab, and as you get the demand, you keep building the big fab. You have a return of invested capital. You have to build the scale, and it takes time to fill that scale. Until that time comes, it's a financial burden. And from an investment perspective, how do you monetize that into a proper margin? Although your margin is value, but the CapEx is a burden on corporations. So how do you mix the two and get the balance to allow companies to invest in the future while really giving the relief from the financial aspect of the valuation for a company, especially when you are a public company? Having the CHIPS Act allows to do that is kind of, think about it as priming the pump for what is yet to come in the future. We have the talent here, we have the capability, we have 5 manufacturing facilities here in the US. So it's possible, it's feasible, we've been doing it for years. The CHIPS Act is yet another complement to accelerate that.
All right, you ran out the clock. You guys are off the hook. You can get a drink now.
Thank you.
Amos Hussain, thank you so much.
Please welcome Mario Harit, CEO of XPO, Jonas Preising, CEO of Manpower Group, and Liz Hoffman, Business and Finance Editor at Semaphore.
Mario, Jonas,
hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So thematically here, we've got someone who moves a lot of stuff and someone who moves a lot of people. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about, I think. And I guess to tee it up for both of you, what is a world that is more fragmented, where borders actually seem to mean something, mean for your business? We'll start with you, Mario.
Well, overall, we're in the business of moving goods. So we handle moving freight for 40, 50,000 customers across predominantly North America and Western Europe. But we don't do the cross-border shipping, for example, on the ocean side
You just pick it up at the port.
So we do it locally. So we do it predominantly locally. For example, here in the US, we have a less than truckload business. But what that means is that customers and companies shift their supply chains to be able to figure out where they source the product and how they move the goods to make their supply chain the most efficient as possible. So you're going to see change, but supply chains have been changing for a long time. I mean, you look at it since the great financial crisis in 2008. You look at it here with COVID most recently. You're seeing more and more companies figuring out what's the best way to source the product, what's the best way to move the product to be able to make it available for their customers, for their consumers. And I think a change in the tariff situation could also impact how people are moving goods across the globe as well.
And Manpower, a giant staffing agency. So how do you think about it?
Well, I think we can think about it in terms of the demographic trends. And most of the developed world and many of countries in even the developing world aren't seeing their populations grow. So we're at 8 billion in the world population today. We'll peak at 10. 80% of the incremental 2 comes from Africa. The other 20% comes from primarily India. And that means every country needs to have an inflow of people into their economy and or productivity improvements so that the wealth of the nation continues to increase. Europe is probably the country that's the worst placed in terms of demographics. Of course, the worst country is Korea, and then followed by Japan. But Europe is well behind. We're well ahead, and won't peak until the mid 50s, 2050, something like that. But that's because of the immigration. And a lot of our growth that we've seen economically over the past couple of years comes from the immigrant part of the population that is generating the additional growth, which we've seen produce really strong growth here in the US.
And so there's obviously a huge debate right now about immigration. I want to split it a little bit between skilled and unskilled and talk a little bit about different parts of your business and what, particularly in the US, seems to be both a crackdown on unskilled labor at the border and then a crackdown on skilled workers who perhaps have a visa issue here and there.
So a lot of countries have applied strategic immigration strategies where they are really trying to attract skilled labor into their markets to take advantage of technological advancement in various sectors. I think we've been very successful and people want to come to the US to work. But with the demographic trends, we will also need unskilled labor or lower skilled labor to come in because we have shortages in a number of sectors, notably in manufacturing. We're excited about this manufacturing boom, but we're having 200,000 unfilled jobs within manufacturing today. So it's actually hard to find both lower and more higher skilled labor overall. At the same time, the mobility of the workforce is declining. So we think of ourselves here in the US as a much more mobile workforce, for instance, compared to Europe, which is absolutely true. It's about twice the mobility in the US compared to Europe, but it's also down 80% compared to where it was just 30 years ago. So people don't move. They want to stay close to their family. They don't know, whether their jobs will be where they are today. They have dual incomes. So people move a lot less, and skilled labor, attracting skilled labor into countries is increasingly difficult as they become wealthier nations in themselves. So all of the moves you saw with Brexit announcing, and as part of this, we no longer wish to have immigration. Well, they got what they asked for. All the Polish skilled laborers that had been educated and trained and highly skilled, they moved back to Poland and making good money there, and now there's more immigration flowing into the UK, but from different countries.
When you say you're excited about this manufacturing boom, do you believe it's coming? And importantly, are your clients staffing up for it? Are they calling you saying, we need those 200,000 plus another 500,000, or do they not entirely believe that this is real either?
Well, I think both things can be true. We can say we're excited about manufacturing getting stronger in the US, which creates wealth and value, which is not the same to say that we will see a boom of employment growth in the manufacturing sector. And I think as we look back over history, since we're winding things back a long time in terms of what we used to do in 1899 and others, just after the Second World War, 44% of the workforce was involved in manufacturing. Fast forward 30 years, it's 20%. Today it's 8%. So could we get more manufacturing back to the US and have some employment growth in the US in manufacturing? Sure we could. Is it going to go back to 20%? Highly unlikely. Yeah. Don't know that we would want that because the kind of labor that has left and has been moved out is primarily dealt with soft goods, lower skilled, low paid jobs, whereas durable goods manufacturing has actually improved over time and is very productive and highly valuable in these industries we've heard over the last couple of days, defense, airplane, all of the things that are high value, high tech driven products we are leaders in those products and attract high wages and very high value per worker output.
Yeah. So Mario, your clients have now been bamboozled a couple of times in the last couple of years, right? A lot of them, I think, spent a lot of the 2010s saying we should probably de-emphasize China. And that got accelerated in the pandemic. And they said, great, we've got these new supply chains. They run through other places in Southeast Asia. They come into different ports. We need you to have the trucks there. What are they telling you now? Where do they want the trucks?
Well, when we look at our customers in North America, more than 2/3, Liz, are industrial companies. So predominantly think of manufacturing, think autos. So think people who build goods and sell goods effectively here in the US. And for these kind of customers, what Jonas said, actually we are seeing it with our customers. You're seeing more and more of that manufacturing demand move to the US, but it's not that all of it would move. I mean, obviously there are low value goods where it doesn't make sense, unless you can automate it, you can have robots do the work as opposed to humans do the work, then you can nearshore that. But when it comes to think of a electrical component manufacturer, well, they are spinning up more capacity here in the US. They already have plants here in North America, and what they're doing now is that they're moving more of that capacity to be built here. Now, for us as a transportation company, what we do for those customers, we are investing in the infrastructure here in North America. So over the last few years, we've added more than $1 billion worth of real estate and trucking terminals that enable us to get capacity for these customers. And you could have a customer who was shipping the product, say, from abroad to somewhere in the country. Then we distribute the product from a warehouse warehouse distribution facility to the rest of the country. And now they're telling us, well, I'm going to expand production in Texas. Can you handle all the inbound freight to that facility and then all the outbound freight from that facility as well? So we're seeing more nearshoring happening. On the retail side, it's a different dynamic. On the retail side, you're seeing more and more retailers want to get their distribution, their warehouses closer to the consumer. So you're seeing smaller locations in metropolitan areas to be able to get the product quicker to whoever is buying that product. And this is where also that's more demand for our industry as well, because now you can have more 1, 2, 3 pallets of freight going from one location to another location, and we can handle that for the customer as well.
Are you seeing any front loading of inventory, panic buying at the wholesale level? Because people are going to, some retailers are offering pre-tariff prices on stuff. Are you seeing that in the warehouses?
We are not seeing a big pullback in demand. There are some customers where you are seeing pullback in demand and you're seeing higher demand from them because they want to be able to get ahead of the potential tariffs. You're seeing other customers being more in a wait and see mode, and you're seeing customers who are changing their sourcing strategy to be able to get through that. Now keep in mind, customers have a certain amount of inventory that they can tap into, either through their suppliers that already have the product in the US, or through their own warehousing infrastructure where they have the product as well. So the longer the uncertainty goes, that could have an impact. But at the same time, they already have the inventory, and we're not seeing yet this big pullback in demand happening with customers either. But things have been relatively stable overall when you think about the domestic trucking environment compared to, obviously, maybe international shipping or other modes of transportation.
Because there was, I think, China reported their economic growth numbers recently, and to the extent you can have faith in the numbers coming out of there, they were much stronger than people expected, and there was some sense that perhaps it was, pull forward revenue for them as retailers kind of loaded up and tried to resupply inventory. Is that something you expect to see?
We haven't seen it yet in any meaningful numbers. I mean, again, you have some companies that are pulling back the demand and they are replenishing that inventory faster, and you have some customers that are in wait and see. So in percentages, they are not large percentages. There is some of it. I mean, if you look at the month of March, for example, there was a higher shipping activity for the ocean carriers, for containers coming into the ports, but April has been holding so far when it comes to the reported numbers there as well. So when you take a step back, we are seeing some customers pull it back, some customers being more in a wait and see mode, some customers burning through inventory in the near term here, while others effectively are keeping their inventory steady as well. So it's a mixed bag at this point. It's not a meaningful number in terms of pullback, is based on what we're seeing from customers.
Jonas, what is the single most in-demand worker? Or
salespeople right now.
Salespeople? Mm-hmm. Selling what?
Slowing all kinds of goods, higher turnover role, need to counter a slowing economy. This is where we see high demand at scale. It tends to actually be high, regardless of where you are in the cycle. But depending on certain moments, these are the kinds of skills that people want to be in front of clients, want to take share in a cooling environment, so they double down on business development.
You're a global business.
Yes, we are. 75 countries.
Is that right? That's a lot. Is this an opportunity for, I interviewed the German finance minister yesterday, and he said, you don't want your skilled workers? Like, we would love them. And I'm wondering if you think this is an opportunity. You are, I believe, from Europe. What's the view from there? Is this a bit of a self-inflicted wound from a skills and workforce perspective that others can capitalize on?
Well, I think every country realizes that to win as a nation, every company realizes to win as an organization, access to skilled talent is going to be a strategic competitive advantage. And that's what all companies are doing. And yesterday's sessions we heard some of the companies talk about the investment they make in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. The private sector is investing, especially the larger enterprises, are investing heavily in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. They need to adjust to new technologies coming, notably AI. So this is clearly going to be a competitive advantage. You see nations positioning themselves as destinations for skilled labor and are attracting, through various visa schemes, ways for higher skilled talent to come and stay and build a life in new countries. So certainly it's going to be very important, and not surprisingly, Germany has positioned themselves in that way. France is trying it with the scientists that are, that are attractive to help foster R&D in different countries. So it's a battle for talent.
Is there a country you think has cracked the visa system, has done it really well?
There are countries that have done very big steps forward. I think notably Australia. I can think of Canada, very strong. Smaller countries like Singapore have a very clear idea of what they want to develop and which kind of talent they want to attract and not attract at the same time. But at scale, this notion of attracting talent is important, but I think the defining challenge of our time is going to be reskilling and upskilling people at scale within the nation. So there is no country at this point that has managed to make that transition at scale. We talk a lot about apprenticeships and how Germany has cracked it. Well, Germany has been at this for 400 years. It's part of the culture. When somebody gets a diploma as a welder, the family celebrates. We're having a party, everybody gives gifts. It's a cultural aspect. It's not a question of training programs. It's a whole shift that needs to happen because the technology is coming at speed. And as you think back about dislocations, and we talked about the impact of China entering into the WTO agreement and automation having reduced about 50% of the workforce, we've been going through technological revolutions like that in the past. This is nothing new. What's new is the speed of change. And it's very difficult for societies to adapt to disruptive change at speed that upends everything to do with their culture, with their belief system in terms of what's a good job versus what not. And I think that's been the challenge, and that was a big challenge in that transition, and will be an even bigger challenge as AI really starts to gain traction across the workforce.
But I'll tell you this, look at our company. We're a company, we predominantly have a lot of drivers. We call it 20,000.
What happened to the driverless trucks? They were going to be on the road. Where are they?
So we are, because we do less than truckload, our drivers have to go stop at customer locations to pick up and deliver freight. So they have about 15 stops per day. Unless humanoid robots get really advanced, it's going to be a long time before their job can be automated. But I'll tell you, going back to reskilling or upskilling, today we have our own driver school program. I love this program because it creates development opportunities for folks where we run schools out of 130 locations and we can graduate up to 2,000 truck drivers per year. Now imagine you're a dock worker making 20, 25 bucks an hour. You go through this program, 7 weeks, you get your commercial truck driving license, and now you can join our ranks. And historically, you have had a chronic driver shortage here in the US. And that's an example of companies like ours upskilling workers and training them and giving them a lot of good career development opportunity over time to be able to grow with us as well.
Have you taken the course?
Not myself. I do go with some of our driver trainers in the yard, but I don't have my CDL.
But there was an interesting poll recently, I think I read it in the FT, and it was that 80% of Americans think that the country would be better off if there was more factory jobs. 20% of them wish they had a manufacturing job, so that's a pretty big gap. But only 2% of people do have a factory job. So kind of everyone in there is right. And I guess I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about kind of the pipeline that you, like, where are you finding these people? What are they doing now? Why is this a path to a better, steadier employment opportunity?
Well, high level, as a truck driver in the US, your compensation can be really good. And we have great benefits programs for our employees as well. So what ends up happening is that a number of our drivers actually make 6 figures compensation in a given year. Great benefits programs. They effectively, it's a very good career for growth over time. Now, it is a very tough job. You're moving, truck drivers keep our country moving. All the way from these chairs we sit on, from the clothes we wear, all of that has moved on a truck here in North America. So effectively, typically when we hire people, it could be folks that are coming out of straight of high school or or getting into their first job. They typically work as dock workers. And as they demonstrate their ability to be responsible, safe behavior, and if they have a good track record with us, we actually put them through the driver school program to be able to get their CDL license. We pay for the full program. They get compensated as they're studying for the program. And at the end, they obviously become a driver in our fleet as well. But it's a combination all the way from people who are just getting started in their career to some folks who might have worked in retail or other industries. And now they want to actually get into moving goods. And it's a great career to be in.
Jonas, what are the AI jobs of the future? What are we going to be training people to do in 10 years?
Well, that's a really good question. So you've heard about the prompt writers.
Yep.
So they came, they're here, and they'll be gone because
they will
technology will
take
taken it out. I think from an AI perspective, and you've heard a lot around this. A lot of people think AI is going to make a big difference, and all of us in organizations believe in the promise of AI. So right now, I think it's easier to think about AI in like 4 steps. The current step that we talk about, that we all feel good about, is a step of AI assisting humans. We are getting help from AI, finding stuff, writing a resume faster, doing all of that, and that improves the productivity of one task somewhere between 15 and 30%. But each job has 20 tasks, 50 tasks. So it doesn't move the needle on any productivity level from an organizational enterprise or at scale for a nation. The next step is the agentic AI applied, which essentially means you automate steps within the content of a job. So now you're automating a bunch of tasks, but it's under the supervision still of a human.
Do you have an agent? So Jonas, CEO agent?
Yes, no, yeah, I certainly would benefit from one, trust me. But that sort of gives a productivity improvement of maybe 15 to 30% in a job. To automate a job, you need to attack or be able to tackle about 80%. And that's the next 2 phases. All the valuations and the hype and the use of electricity to drive data centers, all of this is based on the ultimate vision, which is autonomous decision making, where humans are doing something completely different. And working truly in tandem, but on other stuff. We can see that there's no real change in AI today. The jobs impacted by AI are highly structured and understood in terms of the task from input to output, like coders, like call center operators. Those are clearly understood with end outcomes. That's where you see the impact. So
is the shelf life, I remember, people said learn to code. Turns out that was pretty short-lived advice.
Very short.
Like, are the cycles of skills getting shorter?
They are, just as we talked about, technology accelerates the evolution. So I think a lot of companies will say, hey, you can come from wherever you'd like, but we will train you and reskill you to the skill that we need you to do. As long as you are here and you have a learnability, you can learn and you're interested in learning. We don't worry too much about what you did before, but once you're here, we believe in your potential, and we can evolve that potential with new skills that our company does, just like Mario was talking about. And I think a lot of companies are focusing a lot more on the softer skills, the collaboration and communication skills, because they realize to be successful in this job, which might be different 2 years from now, we need somebody who will continue to learn within the organization.
Is there a sense of purpose that's lost in that? If you kind of hop around and they say, we'll teach you how to do this, we'll teach you how to, what's the career?
Well, I think the career is something that is under the control, much greater control of the individual. Because a company competes to attract talent today, you of course have to be competing on the basics of the right pay, the benefits. But a lot of companies try to distinguish themselves by saying, but if you come to us, whatever you decide to do in this company or somewhere else, you will leave with a greater and better skill set than when you joined us. And that will make you more marketable, and you're less subject to any changes. You can control your own life with the skills you acquire by joining us as an organization.
Okay. Mario, last one to you. I know you said the humanoid robots would have to be really good. If they get really good, when you're a CEO and you're actually faced with the choice, like, should we lay off or over time replace our people with this? Like, as a CEO, how do you think about that?
I think for us overall, one, there is always a human interaction, because when you're picking up and delivering freight, you have somebody on the other side of that dog that you're interacting with. And that customer has a choice. They can either go with company A or they can go with company B. Usually they pick service. And our service has been fantastic
You don't think the robots will be politer?
I don't think the robots will be able to do that from my perspective. However, I'll tell you this, and this is where it gets interesting, where we use AI, and we already are deploying it at scale. So every night we drive 2.6 million miles, which is more than 100 times around the planet. Now, how many miles you drive is based on how you consolidate the freight. Whose freight are you putting with whose freight to go from point A to point B to point C in the most effective way? So we are deploying AI to be able to optimize the flow of goods to minimize the number of miles you have to drive. And that leads to higher efficiency, to better service, to more cost effectiveness. But yet the humans have the human touch to be able to either sell a customer, and in our case, to move the freight. So ultimately, 5 years from now, you can either work in trucking or you can work in AI. I say join trucking.
So we're long
it's a good
humans.
industry.
We're all long humans.
I'm very long human.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. This is a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Anu Bharadwaj, President of Atlassian, and Rachel Oppenheim, Chief Revenue Officer at Semaphore.
Hello.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, Anu. How are you?
Wonderful. It's so great to be joining you virtually.
I know. It's great to have you here. Anu, just to kick us off, we're here as part of course, the World Economy Summit, having a conversation about a range of topics. Of course, how we live, how we work, the impacts of AI, and these mega trends that we see central to that conversation. So happy to have you here. Anu Bharadwaj is the president of Atlassian. Atlassian is a $50 billion software company working with 300,000 companies around the world, and really has come to define in a lot of ways how teams collaborate with one another and how work works. Anu, just to kind of set the table, I'd love to just have you expand a little bit on what Atlassian does for folks in the audience who might not be as familiar.
Sure. Atlassian is a global software company with the mission of unleashing the potential of every team. So we're all about making teams work, and we're the makers of collaboration software that you've probably heard about, Jira, Confluence, Trello, and Loom. We are used by over 85% of the Fortune 500 today. And
85%, you said?
That is correct. We're used by over 85% of the Fortune 500.
Wow, extraordinary.
And yeah, and fun fact, we started out in Australia, but we're now over 12,000 employees spread all over the world in a fully distributed setup.
Fantastic. Well, Anu, Atlassian began in the year 2002. Since then, a lot has changed. We've seen the advent of smartphones and cloud, of course, artificial intelligence, which has dominated many of the conversations here across the World Economy Summit. From your perspective, if Atlassian were started today in the year 2025, what would be different? What would that look like? You know, how would the company, its products be organized?
It's a great question, Rachel, because at Atlassian, our vision is to be a 100-year company. We want to build something that outlasts all of us, and that's a big North Star for us. So it's a question we ask ourselves regularly. What would we do if we were to start Atlassian today? So we ask ourselves that question every year. And first of all, one thing I think that remains unchanged, the thing that has been constant, is we would still be obsessed with helping teams work better together, because that's our DNA. How do we make teams work better together? And today, Atlassian's portfolio is not really organized around the different products that I mentioned, but it's organized around a single unified platform. A platform that connects different teams with each other and provides each team the capabilities they need for their specific problems. Because we strongly believe that the future isn't about owning the tools, it's about owning the spaces, the connections between the tools. And with 300,000 customers showing us what works, we've created an AI-first platform that's the foundation for every team in an organization to work together with each other. So if we were to start today, we would look very much like the way we've organized ourselves. We've evolved our organization ourselves, starting with AI agents. And that looks a lot like what we are building today and how we are organized already. So in order to be a thriving company that's transforming and staying abreast of the future, we've sort of changed our position every year to really be what Atlassian should be in 2025.
That's great. And I know Atlassian's kind of core value and focus is teams. I think everyone who has been in a workplace has had better and worse experiences being on teams. Sometimes the way that we work together and collaborate can be really inspiring. Sometimes it can be maddening. You all specialize in teams and teamwork. In your experience, what makes teams successful? What makes them fall apart? And what do you think we've maybe been undervaluing in how we all think about that?
Yeah, so over 20 years of seeing millions of teams work together, we've been privileged to watch a lot of successful patterns and patterns that don't quite work. And the fun thing is we are able to take all of that and put it into implementation ourselves at Atlassian as a software building company. So the way we work at Atlassian, in fact, might be surprising to many of you. We don't use email internally. We
no email?
No,
imagine that. No email. Really? Like none at all?
So in fact, whenever a new hire comes into Atlassian, the first thing they observe is, we don't have a lot of email out here. And Confluence, one of our products, is like a virtual watering hole. It's a community building sort of interface where knowledge is surfaced when people want it. So it's not I'm writing an email to Rachel asking her, okay, what's the answer to this question, or where do I find this particular department? Information is available serendipitously at the point of time you need it. And we don't do a lot of meetings. We replace millions of hours of meetings with a video collaboration tool called Loom. And think about Loom as asynchronous video tool. It's kind of the TikTok format for enterprises, but it's a lot more educational and less focused on entertainment. And lastly, we track our goals every single day versus quarterly, annually, like traditional enterprises do. And I think all of this together comes together, coalesces into a culture that is open by default. And that I've found is really the cornerstone of how do you build a culture where teams can work together, where collaboration is the default behavior, not something that you have to plan for, design for, and do it very intentionally, versus that's really what the default behavior is. So we do all of these things because we're a global company and we're 12,000 Atlassians across different time zones. What we do is we prioritize asynchronous work. What does asynchronous work mean? Really, it's about documenting decisions, progress, and next steps within the collaboration framework, and not expecting everyone to be online at the same time and really doing a lot more in person. So this is a better, faster, and more flexible way to work. And at Atlassian, we really build the future for our customers by living it ourselves. And that's what we've noticed, that how do you create that culture where you're open by default? How do you train your teams to work as though working with each other is the default behavior, not something they need to shoot for? That's been a surprising but important truth.
When you describe it like that, you make it sound very easy, very seamless, but I'm sure that there are many kind of cultural hills to climb. And also, as you mentioned, Atlassian works with 85% of the Fortune 5000. That is comprised of some legacy organizations. How has that played out? How do you think about how to overcome legacy organizational structures and workflows and importantly, cultures, as you just mentioned as well?
Yeah, so different companies have different approaches to it, but one thing is true, that holding on to legacy structures in today's world is like trying to navigate a Formula One race in a horse-drawn carriage. It's just not going to cut it. And I use a Formula One analogy because F1 fans in the audience will know that we've partnered up with the Williams racing team.
Yes.
So they're now Atlassian Williams, and the Atlassian Williams team has to move quickly, not just on the track, but off the track as well. That's why we're excited to partner with them on their transformation of how do they evolve what they've traditionally been doing to really match the pace of what the new world requires. In today's world, I would say every operating model has an expiration date, whether you acknowledge it or not. And we've faced it ourselves at Atlassian. So we've had to rebuild our entire company on a cloud platform, changing how we build, sell, and deliver all of our software in the cloud instead of an on-premise model. That required a company-wide transformation and letting go of legacy structures because we want to embrace the future and we want to be in the future so we can bring our customers to it. Another example is distributed work. As we scaled to tens of thousands of employees working in a distributed setup, we basically took the stance to say we have no return to office policy, which was a very contrarian stance. But we took that very intentionally because we saw that the overall productivity and happiness and contribution to the company across a distributed workforce was phenomenally better than what we had traditionally as legacy modes of working. But this meant having to change the way we work. We had to invent asynchronous ways of working, and we built our products just to do that. And so my belief is that if you want to thrive, you have to constantly be transforming yourself as a company. And this is what we help our customers do as well.
That's great. I would love to see you debate that with some of the other CEOs on stage. 100% no RTO policy. That's pretty extraordinary. I think just the last question that I would ask you is, we talk about how so many of these technology platforms, applications, systems, AI especially, is going to be completely transformative from a productivity perspective. How are you thinking about not only unlocking productivity, but considering, is that the only metric we should be managing? How can we also think about what will unlock creativity and possibly joy through work as well?
Yeah.
When otherwise it can feel, incredibly daunting and, continue more and more, I would say, technology forward and perhaps not as human.
Yeah, the true ROI of AI isn't doing the same thing faster, but really it's about doing something unimaginable for the first time, right? So productivity, I would say, is table stakes. The real question is, what can your teams now imagine that was previously impossible now that they're supercharged with AI, right? And so when AI handles the predictable, humans can tackle the creative. So that's why when we built our AI solution, Rovo, we're not just focused on improvements and efficiency. I think that's table stakes, but really how do you transform conversations into collective intelligence, shared institutional memory? And so we focus a lot on joy, not just productivity. In fact, we track internally a metric called developer joy. And our Rovo AI agents have made developers' lives easier, not just with the usual things around automatic code reviews and test generation, but the most dramatic unlock has been the ability to simply create a new AI teammate with the push of a button. So think about this. This allows people to really be able to have an additional teammate by their side and focus on the creative, joyful parts of their job. And now this ability is available to every single person. So in fact, over half of the Rovo AI agents we use internally are written by non-technical people who don't know how to code. So for the first time, they can create what they want without being dependent on somebody else. So we've unleashed the joy of creativity across a large swath of people. So this, I think, is going to be crucial when thinking about how is AI transforming your company. Of course, it's going to make you more efficient and effective in many places, but what does it allow you to do that was previously impossible to do? What kind of possibilities does it create for every single team, not just your technical teams?
Well, Anu, thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot from this conversation. We're going to add more joy. I can't wait to collaborate with my AI teammate, and most importantly, I'm done with email. Thank you so much for being here and for your partnership.
Thank you so much for that.
Please welcome Dennis Matthews, CEO of Altus Optimum, and Alex Kantrowitz, founder of Big Technology.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. All right, we got a nice crowd here. Let's hear it from you guys so they can hear you on Twitter and on YouTube. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Got a great crowd, great event. Happy to be here.
All right, and now the fun ends. No, I'm kidding. So, Dennis, let me start with this.
Yes.
You have 4.6 million customers in 21 states.
Yes.
You touch a lot of consumers.
Yes.
What is the vibe right now? Are people feeling good, or are they looking at what's happening in the economy and starting to think about canceling or downsizing?
People are very concerned about their monthly expenses. We have been looking at launching an income-constrained product for a few months now. And so we did some consumer research and we asked customers what are their concerns, what are they focused on, and over 75% of the folks that we surveyed said that they had concerns about their monthly expenses. Our most recent survey on mobile said that over 50% price is the primary consideration when they're choosing a mobile provider. And so it's up to us now to pull together products and packages and offers that meet our customer needs.
They are looking for quality and they are looking for value, but they have to have pricing value that meets their needs.
Right. Have you seen that change at all since Liberation Day? Is there a little bit more wariness among the consumer now?
You know, it's still only a few weeks and we're continuing to learn every day, but this is something that has been an issue in 24 and carries into 25, and I imagine this as a headwind. And so we're continuously looking at how do we evolve how we go to market and the offers that we put in front of customers so that we can provide them great quality and great value.
Let me ask you this. In an economic downturn, do people get rid of cable or do they keep it because that's the only thing that they want to do because they don't want to spend on anything else?
Well, I mean, there's a couple pieces. You know, we have broadband, we have video, we have mobile. And so folks, you know, need broadband more than ever. You know, the reality is that children are doing their homework, people are working for telemedicine, staying connected to their to their family. And so we're seeing that folks are staying connected, but they're looking for value. And so they're looking at how they can optimize, you know, broadband and mobile in particular. And so as we start to talk to our customers, they are looking for providers that are able to provide both and be able to provide discounts that meet their needs. And so that is a topic of conversation more and more. And I imagine as we continue into this year, we're going to have to continue to meet our customer needs.
So we're here talking about the future of connectivity. And when I think about the future of connectivity, the thing that comes up is satellite internet. You know, when I think about the future, thinking about what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink and others are doing with satellite internet leads me to wonder whether the current broadband infrastructure we have today will become unnecessary in the face of rising satellite internet consumption. How do you think about it? Is Elon your competitor now?
I mean, one, it's incredible what Elon has done, right? I mean, you have to, the innovation and the speed at which they're moving, it's incredible. The reality is that, you know, while we are building out our network and continuing to enhance our speeds, and now we have multi-gig services across the country in many places, and we're going to continue to roll that out. There are places that are very difficult to reach. It would cost us tens of thousands of dollars. They're very challenging. And at least today, when I look at what they're able to do, is they're able to meet the needs. And everybody needs broadband. And so we're an advocate of that. At the same time, the needs of speed and reliability and availability continue to evolve. You know, the needs from 10 years ago versus today have changed dramatically. You know, I remember when I was starting out in the industry, 100 gigs of data consumption was like a big deal. Now I have folks that are over a terabyte or multiple terabytes. And so we are investing to make sure that we can build the absolute best network to drive innovation, to drive creativity. And you know, we'll continue to work alongside these types of technologies as different customers have different needs.
So if I'm reading between the lines right, Starlink, van life people living off grid, you're providing for the folks who are in bigger metro areas.
You know, I don't know I don't know if they're living in vans or off the grid, but they're living in places that are difficult for us to serve. But, you know, folks are testing and trialing different technologies. You know, the other technology that's available is fixed wireless from the telco providers. That has gained a lot of traction. That's a wireless service. Many people have tried that. And some find that it's good enough, and some find that it's not good enough, especially when you have more and more streaming, video conferencing, you know, just heavy usage. People have to figure out what makes sense for them. You have, you know, I know for my family with 2 teenage girls, you know, they're never looking at the TV. They're looking at their iPad, they're consuming video in ways that I could have never imagined. And so every family has to decide what products and services and value propositions meet their needs.
So again, thinking about the future of connectivity.
Yes.
I wonder what you're working on, because in a lot of areas, the internet is fast enough. I don't think that a little bit better speed makes a difference in terms of where you want to end up going in terms of selecting your provider. So is it just a race to the bottom on cost, or is your North Star making the internet faster when you're talking about connectivity? What are you working toward?
We're continuously working on quality. First and foremost, you know, the pain
that I personally experience when there is a blip in the internet in my house, okay? I acutely feel that pain, and I'm sure every parent and every spouse, feels that pain. The world is ending. And so we are working hard to make sure that nobody has to have that moment and that we minimize those moments for my own personal sanity as well. And so first and foremost, it just has to work. And AI is incredible, helping us really look at how we manage that technology even more strategically, communicate more effectively so that customers know what's happening, why it's happening, when are we going to fix it, and just keep them informed. There's things that we can prevent. We can do proactive maintenance. We can't prevent somebody from running into our head end and setting it on fire. So when that happens, we need to tell you what happened and then make sure that we're reacting.
That happens?
Quickly. Things happen.
Okay.
There's lots of things that happen that cause an outage. Some things that we can get ahead of and some things that are just natural, events, then we have to react. And so, I do believe that it's our responsibility to continue to drive quality and speed and make the absolute best network available to folks that can then innovate on top of it. And so if I knew what those innovations were, I would have another job. But I want to make these networks available to people that can then use that speed, use that quality to now build applications on top, things that I can't even imagine.
So you talked earlier when you talked about where satellite might come in, about those areas that are really remote. And there's been this conversation around the digital divide, where some people that live in cities, for instance, have great access to the internet, and others don't. How real is the digital divide right now?
I've been in this space for some time. I've spent time with our community partners at Boys and Girls Clubs, at food banks, at folks that are working with various constituents. And the digital divide is real. One is the access and one is education. And so we're working with our community partners to provide both. As we work with the Boys and Girls Club to provide computer labs and connectivity, as we work with, in New York City, the Big Apple Connect, they have over 70,000 homes that we're able to provide connectivity to. And so I do think it's important not only to provide access, but to provide education on how to leverage that connectivity, whether it's for schoolwork, whether it's for work. I view it as, I still remember my father, worked in public transit authority. He fixed trains. This door knocker came, door salesman, and he brought a set of Encyclopedia Britannica, okay? And my father, without a lot of money, bought the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I thought he was crazy. And guess what? For the next 15 years, I used that almost every day. And when I was talking to the children and working with our community partners, the internet is that Encyclopedia Britannica. Every child deserves to have access to that information to do their homework. And so this is a critical part of our mission, is to provide connectivity in every community that we serve, and we're partnering with those that are on the ground to make that access available.
Okay, so we're coming towards a close here. I want to ask you about the value of connectivity. Now, obviously, there's a lot of good things you can do with internet, but we also are living in a moment where people are lonelier than ever before. Bowling Alone that talked about how we've left our bowling leagues and now we're at home. The reason was television, and TV is amazing right now.
Yes.
It's very good.
It's more content than ever.
Is that good though? Because we're more lonely than we've ever been. How do you think about that?
I think everything in moderation.
But people aren't good at being. It's called binge for a reason.
When I look at the rise of user-generated content, when I look at the tech companies now entering this space, the reality is that we have a bit of content bloat. When you look at the traditional cable packages, there's a lot of content that's great, but then there's a lot of content that's bundled in that nobody ever watches. And so our mission is to provide the products and the services that allow you to watch the content that you want to watch the way you want to watch it. There are still folks in our customer base that like traditional cable TV experience, but they don't want all the extra content that they don't watch. And so we're working.
But the question is really about like what's going on with our society.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think that contributes at all? Or does a content provider have any responsibility?
Our responsibility is to provide our customers with the content that they want to watch, how they want to watch it. And we're laser focused on making sure we maximize the product and the value. And look, I do believe that connectivity, human connectivity is important. And I do believe that there's a lot of value in that. Part of what we've done in our own workforce is have a more balanced approach of being in the office to have human connectivity. At the same time, people are looking for entertainment.
Right.
And we want to provide that entertainment to people in the way they want to watch it.
All right, well, we're here together. We're also speaking to people on the internet, so a little bit of the best of both worlds. Let's give it up for Dennis, and thank you, everybody. You've been amazing.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you, my friend. Great.
Please welcome Doug Carr, CEO of Union Station Redevelopment Corporation, and Eleanor Mueller, Congress reporter at Semaphore.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Doug, so much for taking the time to be with us.
Likewise, thank you.
We want to take a little bit of a break from, talking about how we get places, but instead, modernizing the transportation hubs that so many of us pass through every day, and few people are better positioned to talk about that than Doug, who not only oversaw the redevelopment of Moynihan Train Hall in New York, but is now overseeing, the incredibly in-depth project of redeveloping Union Station, which so many of us in DC are very deeply invested in. And I have a pressing question for you first, Doug, which is, why are there 2 Chipotles in Union Station?
Very good question. I think it's maybe line management. If you're in the know, maybe when the top one's busy, you can go to the bottom one. But I'll try and get an answer to that for you.
I appreciate it. So. And then you and I were talking a little bit right before we came on stage about how crucial these transportation hubs can be to the economic developments of where they're located. And I'm curious to get your take on, how the Union Station project has changed and how the hub has changed since the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think really starting with, the opportunity to kind of highlight why transportation really matters, I think is an important part and, a good opportunity for me to kind of advocate for it. Transportation really underlies, everybody's, daily commute. In just this week at Union Station, we will have brought many people to this event. We will have brought people to their doctor's appointments, to their place of work. We will have processed many fans going to Nationals games, Capitals games, and Orioles games. So, it's really kind of a daily commodity that we provide. And, why does it matter is because it really also supports economic growth and development. These projects, these facilities, not only connect people to places, but it also connects labor to industry. So particularly across the DMV region, Washington Union Station really has an important role of the ability to connect what is a very deep and rich talent pool and really support kind of the different industries that we have here in the region.
How have you seen Union Station change as people began returning to work?
Yeah, particularly as a transportation facility, we were definitely not immune to the effects of COVID. In fact, probably directly impacted a dramatic reduction in activity, dramatic reduction in commuting behavior, fundamental changes in commuting patterns. So all of that has had a negative effect, and I know the effect is spread across virtually every industry, particularly in transportation though. It's had an effect on the retail environment that we have in the station. So not only the operators, slower, that kind of has a secondary effect on the business operations of the station. And even on that point, I think it's important to recognize that the facilities themselves are really unique and individual commercial enterprises. You have the transportation assets, which have a very natural and symbiotic relationship with the retail and the commercial assets. So stations, how we look at it, particularly, is really harmonizing the balance between transportation uses, which can really provide, a lot of commercial activity and beneficial activity. It's gotten much better, obviously. The return to work mandate, we see it firsthand. The inner city travel with Amtrak and kind of the New York to Washington travel, that rebounded fairly quickly. And what has been lagging has been the commuter travel. But the commuter travel really is the lifeblood of these facilities. That's where the majority of our passengers come from. So it's really nice to see that rebound is happening for us.
Have there been any shifts since the beginning of the administration?
I think what I just highlighted was one of them where, we're just seeing generally more activity.
Okay.
I think some of the shifts that we look at, so to kind of go back to fundamentally why these projects matter, they're economic development initiatives. They facilitate economic growth. They represent jobs. They represent increased tax roll when you kind of start to get these facilities, but they also represent quality of life. By revitalizing transportation, particularly facilities, and making it more reliable and making it more safe, we think that's kind of a direct quality of life transfer. So with the administration, we also spend a lot of time thinking about how we deliver large-scale infrastructure investments. How do we execute on projects? You referenced the one in New York, which really was a good model of how to execute successfully. So what we think about is delivering value for investment. That has always remained important, and perhaps now we've always been under circumstances where the needs outstrip the resources available. And perhaps something that we're monitoring very closely is how grant programs are administered, how future funding is coming. But really for us, the mission remains the same in terms of delivering efficiently, effectively, and kind of maximizing the relationship between commercial and operational aspects.
So the project was originally slated to wrap up by 2040. I mean, do you still see that as a feasible timeline?
I often say I'd like to see some ribbon cutting before my son goes to college, and he's in third grade. So the project is, the station expansion project is namely what we're referencing here. Fundamentally an important part for the region to expand and accommodate the growth that is anticipated in Maryland and Virginia and the district and really along the Northeast corridor, and now opening up a portal to points south. That's fundamentally what the project does. It kind of prepares us to accommodate that growth. Importantly, there's other investments that are happening not only regionally, so what happens not only at Union Station has an effect really along the corridor. So there's a lot of initiatives that are happening in Maryland, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, for example. There's the Gateway Tunnel in New York that's happening. There's the Long Bridge investment that's happening in Virginia. All of these are designed to facilitate that growth. So it's really important for us to get Union Station right because we are at the nexus of really all these projects.
The Transportation Secretary, who's going to be on stage right after us, asked Amtrak, WMATA, and the DC Mayor to provide reports on crime at Union Station. They should have been done by this month. I mean, can you speak at all to the results?
Yes, so that's been a recent initiative, but it's not new. It's something that, as a transportation center, particularly in an urban context, safety and security is the primary focus for us on a daily basis. It's certainly not something you can take for granted. We have trending that's showing that incidents are actually being reduced. Crime and other problematic behavior is actually being reduced, but it really takes only one incident that's high profile that can kind of create a perception. So for us, it's a focus that we really work on every day, never something that you can actually take for granted. And it's a challenge, it's a real challenge, being a kind of an urban center where it's, a very public center, facilitates a lot of activity, different types of people. But we did work very closely with the Amtrak police. There's a new partnership. We are blessed with a lot of resources. Coordinating and making sure those resources are operating together well is a large part of the focus, and that work is well underway.
We mentioned that you oversaw the development of Moynihan Train Hall in New York City. What was your first reaction when you saw that the federal government was going to be taking over that project? Or the Penn Station project, rather?
Yeah, I think Moynihan really set the stage to enable the next phase of Penn Station. So I think that was a critical first piece that, one description that I've heard is kind of a visual description is we've been able to kind of relieve the pressure that was consolidated at Penn Station and move people across the street at 8th Avenue. So that's really, I think, step number one. I think the reality of these projects, to borrow a phrase, is agencies don't deliver projects as much as people and teams deliver projects. So what I think is really important, when I was working in New York very closely with a lot of these projects, a lot of the concepts, the pillars to successful projects really start with a pretty firm vision on your design, and maturing your design and engineering is a critical first part of that. Project governance is another significant pillar in terms of how you set up the team, how you integrate expertise, experience, really emphasizing, I think, the human nature of a project. So it's people and process. And then you obviously have a lot of other factors, including capital markets, real estate markets, partnerships. But it's kind of once a lot of those align, you have a small window of opportunity to really drive these projects forward.
My colleague Shelby asked you this right before we got on stage, but Amtrak, paid over $500 million for Union Station earlier this year. Do you think that Amtrak should be privatized? I mean, that's something obviously we've seen this administration advocate for.
We think it presents a really good opportunity. I can speak to Washington probably more specifically. I think it presents a tremendous opportunity for us to take the next step in terms of making improvements to the station. One point I like to emphasize is the station expansion project really is on that elongated timeline. It's a very technically complex construction project, very large scale, but we're not waiting to make improvements for the expansion project. We're looking to make improvements near term. For us, in a very selfish way, the ability to prove to people that we can deliver near term is going to ultimately help us deliver long term. That provides credibility, it provides confidence to people that we're on the right track. So I think the acquisition and the positioning of Amtrak provides an opportunity for us to kind of focus on that work. In terms of the privatization, it's a very big network, very big country, very difficult problem to answer.
Above your pay grade.
Above my pay grade, yes.
I have another pressing question for you. I am told that there was a bar in Union Station for almost 3 decades. My colleague Burgess Everett actually had his first legal beer there when he was 21 years old. Do you think we'll see another bar in Union Station anytime soon?
Absolutely. I think it's really part of the passenger experience, which is very important to us. The passenger experience is not only how the operators, process people through, but it's also, or the retail environment is a large part of that. To look at New York, one of the most successful aspects of that is the Moynihan Train Hall bar. And there was a lot of back and forth for a whole nother panel, a whole nother day, kind of how that really came about. But it was really kind of, understanding that those types of uses play a very important part to the overall passenger experience. And we are more than a train station. We are a local part of the community. I know you work on Capitol Hill, you come through us very often. The Noma neighborhood, which really didn't exist as of 10 years ago, we are a very central part of that. So we are certainly much more than a train station, and having a good bar is definitely part of that. So,
have you had any interest from DC brands?
We had a lot of interest, with the general activity picking up. I think that interest continues. So we're eager to kind of find what the next use is as part of a much broader plan for making improvements. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Doug, and thank you, all of you. We've got the Transportation Secretary himself here to take the stage, so stay tuned. And thanks, Doug.
Thank you so much.
Please welcome Sean Duffy, U.S. Transportation Secretary, and Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent at Semaphore.
So Secretary Sean Duffy is joining us today just about 100 days into his tenure as the Transportation Secretary. Thank you for making the time. It's been very busy, I know. I want to start, you made an announcement just today, which provides the first national framework for autonomous vehicles. And part of that deals with safety reporting, but there's also been calls to go further as AV use rises, particularly because there's a lot of unsettled questions about liability for accidents. And Brookings released a paper earlier this month that called on Congress to create a compensation fund for AV safety incidents. And I'm wondering if that's something that you would consider, and if not, how would you like to see liability addressed?
So first off, I think I do think of transportation somewhat like the internet, somewhat like the iPhone that revolutionized and changed the way people live and work and interact. And I think we're at the cusp of those same kind of changes in transportation. How products and people move is going to radically change over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so whether that's drone technology, delivering your hot coffee in the morning, or your Amazon package, or eVTOLs, which are Ubers in the air, or autonomous vehicles. And I think what we have to do is have smart rules in place that always have safety as the backdrop, but allow innovators to innovate. And the innovation will happen. It'll happen in places like China. It won't happen here unless we have the right rules in place. And so what we're trying to do is think through how can we advance those rules to allow industry to continue to expand and grow as we continue to monitor and keep them safe. And so in regard to a compensation fund, again, I'll let the Congress take that up, but I think that's probably better addressed by them. Our job is to make sure that we have rules of the road that allow that innovation and the future technology to be developed and the jobs to be created in America.
And there was also another big AV announcement today. Uber and Volkswagen are teaming up on a robo-taxi service. Do you see robo-taxis being treated the same way as personally owned autonomous vehicles when it comes to safety and liability?
Well, they're going to be different animals, but I think the concept is the same around safety and technology. And so, again, you might have an individual vehicle, or we might be deploying fleets of a vehicle that again, the safety components of no matter how it's going to be used, whether in a fleet or for individual purposes, I think the concepts are going to be the same. And we deal with congestion. Congestion is a common concept that we have to deal with. Do we build new roads and bridges? Do we expand lanes? I think autonomous vehicles are going to radically change the way vehicles move and how we deal with congestion. But also we lose 40,000 people a year, 40,000 plus people a year to car crashes. And I think this technology can eliminate some of the human error that results in those crashes and those deaths, and we save a lot more lives.
Well, so how safe do autonomous vehicles need to be? Because I know a lot of Americans are uncomfortable with the idea of essentially letting robots take control. Do they have to be as safe as human drivers or safer?
Well, listen, I think, again, we'd like them to be safer than human drivers, but I think the accidents that you see from technology are very different than accidents you see from humans, and so that can freak us out. But in our announcement, what we want to do is be able to get good data. But if there's a scraping of paint off of an autonomous vehicle, the reporting requirements became very laborious and challenging, and it slowed the process down. So we're streamlining. How do we get the right information, get the right data, get the cooperation from the participants to then be able to analyze it and make better rules? And I think the industry has been very cooperative. They want to give us the information because they want us to expand the playing field. Just one other point in this space. Again, we have all these, every state is developing their own set of rules. You can't have an industry develop where every state has different rules. It's not going to work. So the federal government, NHTSA, has to actually set a national standard that everyone's going to play by and develop to.
And you mentioned congestion in your earlier answer, and I want to, yesterday in the congestion pricing lawsuit brought by New York's MTA, lawyers for the U.S. Attorney's Office mistakenly filed an internal letter that identified some potential weaknesses in the Transportation Department's case. And today, a department spokesperson questioned whether those lawyers were attempting to, quote, resist and undermine the case. Do you feel that this was deliberate?
I don't know again, it's a pretty significant mistake when, first of all, we disagree with the memo they sent us, and then the memo they sent us, they load into a public forum. As lawyers, it's incompetence or it was on purpose. I don't know the answer to that, but just on this, so we're having an engagement with New York City. They have a congestion pricing regime, $15 to get into the cordoned area. And the issue is, again, people have already paid for those roads. And when you have to pay a second time to use those roads and there's no free access, there's no free pathway, it's fundamentally unfair. And if you're wealthier, it's actually great. Cordon pricing in New York City, like you drive right in and no one's on the road. You're like, this is fantastic. I love it. This is perfect, because everyone else has been priced out. And that's not the way our system is supposed to work, where if you're rich or you're an elite, you got to use the roadways. And if you're middle class and poor, we price you out of the roadway system. And I think that's, so it's fundamentally unfair. The Congress never intended it to operate like this. And then they force people to ride subways. And if I'm not a liberal, I'm a conservative, but if you are a liberal and you want everyone to ride on transit, make transit beautiful, make transit safe, make it run on time. But when people stand against the wall in subway stations in New York because they're afraid of being shoved in front of a train, you got a problem. And so again, you're taking them out of their car, moving them into the subway, and they're dirty and they're unsafe. And I think it's fundamentally an affront to fairness to the average American who's forced to use that system because they can't afford to use the road that they already paid for with their tax dollar. So, that's a really long answer to your question.
So you're not sure whether it was deliberate. Should these attorneys face professional consequences?
So we can ask the DOJ. I have my own personal opinion on that. I won't give it to you.
We can listen to it right here.
Right here.
If you want.
Should there be consequences? Absolutely. What those consequences should be, the Attorney General makes that decision.
And you're still confident in your existing legal strategy?
I am.
Mm-hmm. I also want to ask about the FAA.
And the public policy strategy. I mean, we don't do this in America. Rich people don't just use roads. If you take what's in Virginia here, the fast lane, there's always free lanes that you can get to your destination. You always get a free pathway to get from point A to point B. If you want to go faster, you might be able to pay an extra toll to get there quicker with less traffic, but you can always get there for free. This is the one time you can't get into the cordoned area for free. You got to pay a second time. It's, again, fundamentally unfair. FAA, sorry.
FAA. You started with this horrific January crash at the DCA airport. The FAA has taken some clear safety steps since then. Are you not done yet in terms of changes to DCA rules, and are you going to consider similarly restricting helicopter traffic around other airports?
So in DCA, we had a boxed out area around runway 33, which goes out over the Potomac. You had a lot of fixed wing and helicopter cross traffic, and it worked well for decades, and then it didn't work well. And it exposed the real problem with how close some of these aircraft were coming to each other. So we have restricted traffic in that area, but for life-saving missions, law enforcement missions, and presidential movement. And when that happens, we actually shut down airplanes from landing and allow that traffic to go down what's called Route 4 or up and down the Potomac. So, but there was 85 really close calls in the last 4 years in that airspace. And maybe Twitter saw it. Twitter was like, hey, these are really close. We should be concerned about this cross of traffic in DCA. But the FAA didn't see it. So that's a concern for me. It should have been seen. So we're now using AI tools to look at other airspaces on where these incidents may be occurring that the human isn't seeing it. and then we can identify and take action in those spaces.
So there is the potential for
100%.
for other airports to see similar changes.
100%.
I also want to ask about Amtrak. We have a few minutes left. Amtrak doesn't have the money to undertake the Penn Station renovation, especially after the Gateway project's completed. What's your plan now that you've taken over the project from New York, and what's the timeline on that?
So first of all, the last administration gave Penn Station renovation to MTA. MTA, I think, has mismanaged everything they touch. They're going to spend $4 billion on a mile of subway in New York. $250 million, $250 million is going for consulting. So we think we can do a better project with a public-private partnership as we look at that renovation. And so, again, we're going to look for bids in the near future, assess those bids, and be able to move forward.
And speaking of privatizing, Elon Musk, I believe, has raised this. Do you think Amtrak should be privatized, or could parts of it be privatized?
Are you trying to walk me into a political trap here? Is that what we're doing here? That's the decision for Congress. Congress can make the decision on Amtrak. But there are, I mean, if you look at Europe,
Well,
where
Florida, for example, I believe Florida has a private rail service.
So Brightline in Florida is running privately. The DOT made some investments there. Brightline West, which is going to go from Las Vegas to LA, it's going to be the first high-speed rail in America. We made some investments there also. But it kind of brings, if you look at the California high-speed rail project, it was from LA to San Francisco. 17 years, $16 billion, not one track was laid. This is outrageous. So if you're going to promise rail or high-speed rail, we should actually deliver on the rail projects. We should actually see what a high-speed rail looks like in America. And so, again, there might be an opportunity from Dallas to Houston. There's opportunities around the country to invest in high-speed rail, but it just can't be the federal government. We need the private partners to play as well.
So is there anything you could do from a federal government standpoint to kind of improve some of the things like Amtrak without privatizing it?
So, listen, I think that there could be some European-esque models where we own the track, but then we allow other entities to lease out portions of the track, and you can have other private competition to Amtrak. There's some ideas out there we could explore. But again, I mean, it's nice to go on the Acela from DC to New York. Moves nicely, but again, if you ride high-speed rail in the rest of the world, it's actually kind of embarrassing that this is what we have in this country, and we can do a lot better than what we are doing. And am I committed to Amtrak, or am I committed to great rail service? I'm committed to great rail service. I'm committed to going, how do we innovate? How do we invest and make the experience wonderful for the American people, as opposed to a commitment to Amtrak? And that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to Amtrak. It's just that the mission can't be the company. The mission has to be, what is the experience of the end user, and it can be greatly improved.
And I also want to ask about bikes, because the federal government is reviewing
all the hot topics here.
all projects that involve bikes. Why are you guys doing that? Do you want to reduce the use of bikes?
Say that again.
The federal government's reviewing all projects that involve bikes.
Yes.
Why are you doing that?
I'm not opposed to bikes. I love bikes, but so in New York even, they want to expand bike lanes, and then they get more congestion. They correlate. So at one point we have to look at what are the roads for, and how do we use our roads? And if we put bikes on roadways and then we get less traffic and we get congestion, it's a really bad experience for a lot of people. So I think it's important to look at the overall use of the infrastructure. And there's some places that bike lanes might make sense, and we should invest in those. But I do think it's a problem when we're making massive investments in bike lanes at the expense of vehicles. That's a problem. Also, if you drive in a congested area where there are bike lanes, it seems to be really dangerous for bikers. And there's a lot more crashes that happen when you integrate very closely bikes and cars together. I think there's a safety component to that too. And so it's something that I want to look at, because I don't know how much sense it makes. I haven't made a final determination, but I'm concerned.
Is there a way to kind of merge bikers and drivers in the way we've seen in Europe, for example, in major cities? Or you think some cities essentially just don't have that infrastructure, don't have that ability?
Well, I think that I do think you see more congestion when you add bike lanes and take away vehicle lanes. I think that's a problem. And so we're not Europe. We don't have the same vehicle sizes as the Europeans do. We don't have the same mentality as Europeans do. And so I don't think we should necessarily buy into the European model. But we do have to I do think it's important to look at data. If we're able to say, we put in bike lanes, we've saved lives, and we reduced congestion, we should do more bike lanes. That would make sense. And we should look at the data. I'm not opposed to bike lanes if that was the end result. But if the result is we don't have many more bikers, but we have more congestion in the traffic, and it takes people way longer to get from point A to point B, well, then I'd say, well, that doesn't make sense. I think it should be data-driven, not ideologically driven. Not that you can't just wish more people to ride bikes and less people in cars. And by the way, it gets cold in the winter, so it's challenging in New York.
Not in every major city.
No,
you
but
got Miami.
In New York, maybe not in Miami, maybe, but Wisconsin, Minnesota, Chicago, Michigan. It gets cold, and so you might get a couple months of biking, but the rest of it gets to be awfully chilly.
Fair enough. Well, we are already out of time, so
so
I
much
really
fun.
appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Please welcome to the stage Bennett Richardson, General Manager and Global Head of Public Affairs at Semaphore.
Hey everybody, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to our extraordinary speakers and journalists for such great conversations this afternoon. Obviously, also thank you to Hyundai, our founding partner of the Future Mobility Track. With that, we're going to be closing day 2 of the World Economy Summit. Really appreciate you all being here. Hope you can join us tomorrow morning for day 3, right back here at the Conrad. We have 4 more great tracks on some of the themes you heard about today, from AI and the next tech revolution to trends in consumer confidence, the future of the global workforce, future of healthcare, a ton of other great speakers. So hope to see you again tomorrow morning. Thank you all so much.